My name is Olivia, and I'm a 32-year-old housewife. My husband, Liam, is 34 and works an ordinary office job. We've been married for 8 years and have a precious daughter named Ava, who is 6 years old. Ava is incredibly adorable, and both Liam and I are completely smitten with her. I have an older sister, Emma, who is 3 years older than me. She recently turned 35 and went through a divorce due to a personality clash, becoming a single mother to her 4-year-old son, Noah. One day, we planned to go to the zoo with Emma and Noah. Unfortunately, I caught a cold at the wrong time. When I tried to cancel the outing, Liam kindly offered to take the day off from work, not wanting to disappoint the kids, even though it meant he and Emma would be alone together with the children. I didn't think anything of it. However, one day when I was walking through the shopping district after running errands, I happened to see Liam and Emma sitting together in a cafe. I wondered why they were together, but as it was almost time for Ava to come home from her after-school program, I headed home, still feeling uneasy. That night, when Liam came home, I asked him about it. He explained that it had started raining and they happened to meet, so they went to the cafe to wait for the rain to stop. He seemed calm and nonchalant, so I trusted him at the time. But after that day, Liam started coming home late more frequently. He also began asking for more money, claiming he was short on cash. On his days off, he went out more often, and whenever Emma visited our house, their interaction seemed more familiar than before. Suspicion began to creep into my mind, even though our relationship with Ava remained as strong as ever. Then an incident occurred that made me realize something was amiss. Emma came over as usual and asked if I could take care of Noah for about a week. A friend had invited her on a trip to Hawaii, and it was difficult to bring Noah along. Emma pleaded, saying she needed a break after being so busy. I understood how hard it was for her since the divorce, and though reluctant, I agreed to help. As Emma's trip approached, Liam told me he would be away for a while on a business trip, visiting multiple areas over several days. I thought it was a tough coincidence, but I was shocked when I learned his departure date. It was the same day as Emma's trip to Hawaii. Was this really a coincidence? Liam's increasing phone use and secretive behavior made me more suspicious. When Emma visited, their interaction seemed unusually close. On the day of Emma's departure, she arrived early in the morning with Noah. The moment I held Noah's hand and immediately noticed something was off. His hand was unusually hot and his body felt feverish when I lifted him. I didn't need a thermometer to know he had a high fever. "Emma, doesn't Noah have a fever?" I asked. Yes, he's been running a fever since yesterday. It hasn't gone down yet," she admitted. "What? We have to take him to the hospital right away. Surely your son's health should be more important than a trip," I insisted. But then Emma said something outrageous. "So I'm counting on you." "What? You're leaving your child here while he has a fever?" I was incredulous. "I have no choice, do I? I made the promise a long time ago. It's ridiculous to pay a cancellation fee," she replied. "That's not the point, is it? Isn't Noah the most important here?" I argued. "Of course he's important, but I'm not worried because you're here, Olivia. Take good care of him for me," Emma said. "Wait, Emma." Despite my attempts to stop her, Emma left. I couldn't believe it. Noah was suffering from a high fever, and she left him in my care. Noah seemed to be really struggling, probably because of the strain of moving while having a high fever. I quickly laid him down on the bed and placed a cold, wet towel on his forehead. While I was preparing an ice pillow in the freezer, Liam woke up. "Liam, it seems Noah has a fever," I said. "Really? Is that so?" he replied sleepily. "Emma is terrible. She's going on a trip, leaving Noah in this state," I fumed. "Well, she had planned it long ago, right? She probably can't cancel at this point," he reasoned. "You too, Liam. Poor Noah. If you feel that way, you should take good care of him," I said. "Liam, can't you do something about your business trip? If Noah has some contagious disease, he might pass it to Ava. I'll take care of Noah, so I want you to take care of Ava," I pleaded. As a mother who loves her daughter dearly, I reluctantly agreed. Work is important, but surely our daughter is even more important. However, my expectations were betrayed. "What? That's impossible. You should know that," I exclaimed. "If you're worried, just leave her at your parents' house," Liam suggested. "Even if you say that, my parents are busy with work and your parents' house is too far away to go now," I countered. "Then there's no choice," Liam replied. Well, all we need to do is let Noah sleep. It'll be fine, he said casually. Say that so casually. What do you want me to do then? I retorted. It's time. I have to go. I'll be going then. Liam hurried off, leaving me behind. I quickly called my parents. They couldn't take a day off work on such short notice, but my mother promised to leave early and come pick up Ava as soon as possible, which gave me some relief. While waiting for my mother to arrive, I kept Ava confined to her room, feeling sorry for her. Meanwhile, Noah's condition seemed to be worsening. In addition to this fever, he started to cough in the early afternoon. When my mother arrived early from work, I immediately took Noah to the pediatrician. On the way to the hospital, my heart ached seeing Noah suffer even from the car ride. The doctor diagnosed it as a common cold and prescribed an antipyretic, advising me to monitor his condition closely. However, I was warned to call an ambulance without hesitation if his fever rose further or if he became dangerously delirious. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered to myself, overwhelmed with concern for Noah's well-being. I suddenly had to ask you to take care of Ava. Don't worry about it. More importantly, I'm worried about Noah. My mother assured me over the phone. Noah was as dear to my parents as Ava. After finishing the call with my mother, I felt an urge to call my husband's company. I needed to know the location of his supposed business trip in case of emergencies. The response confirmed my worst fears. He was on paid leave. Looking up at the sky, a bad premonition began to feel real. I opened my husband's laptop, which I had never seen before, and examined his search history. The destination was Hawaii, and all arrangements, plane tickets and hotel reservations, had been made by him. I recognized the name of the hotel. It was where my sister had mentioned staying. My sister and husband in Hawaii at the same hotel at the same time. Such a coincidence was implausible, not even 1 in 10,000. The fact that my husband, who claimed to be on a business trip, was on paid leave in Hawaii was abnormal. Out of curiosity, I checked my sister's social media. There were no new posts, but her recent ones showed her often with someone. The clothing visible in the photos looked all too familiar. What turned my suspicion into certainty was a picture where the person with her wore a watch that I had given my husband, not expensive, but distinct in design. This person, clearly not my husband, appeared in multiple photos with her, wearing the same clothes and watch. The possibility of coincidence was virtually zero. Then I found the conclusive photo in an album labeled Window Shopping. My sister was reflected in a shop window, and at the edge of the photo, unmistakably, was my husband. My sister, elated, had likely posted the photo without realizing he was in the reflection. With trembling hands, I saved all the photos. There was no doubt now. My sister and husband were having an affair. They were together right now, and it felt like everything fell into place. The foundation I had built with my husband was crumbling all at once. I called them repeatedly, but each time an automated voice message played, it seemed they had turned off their phones. Noah's fever still hadn't subsided, and seeing his pained expression, anger began to well up inside me. Despite a young child suffering so much, despite my own tough situation, at this very moment, my sister and husband were likely laughing and enjoying their trip to Hawaii. Could there be a more cruel story than this? Shaking with anger, I tried to think about what to do next, but that would have to wait. First and foremost, I needed to wait for Noah to recover. Yet there was no sign of his fever decreasing. If anything, it seemed to be getting worse. I was shocked when I took his temperature minus 107 degrees. Children are susceptible to high fevers. Ava had once had a fever of 104 degrees, but never this high. Why wasn't the fever reducer working? Noah was completely exhausted, and any movement seemed to cause him pain. Desperate to suppress the panic threatening to overwhelm me, I was just considering calling an ambulance when my smartphone buzzed. "Mommy," Noah murmured weakly, his face contorted in pain, calling out for his mother. "I can't forgive them. I'll never forgive them," I vowed silently, my vision clouding with rage. Just as it seemed my anger would consume me, Noah's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. A week had passed since then, and despite my sorrow, today was a clear day. I found myself staring blankly at the wide blue sky, tears streaming down my face. I had lost count of how many times I had cried, yet my tears showed no signs of drying up. Ava's hand trembled in mine, and as I lifted her up, I could see my parents, also in tears, comforting her. Other family members and friends gathered, all sharing in our grief. Everyone, without exception, was in tears. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated. I set Ava down and glanced at the display. It was my sister's name. "Hello," I answered hesitantly. "Oh, Olivia, it's been a while. I just got back from Hawaii. I'm at the airport now, and I'm going to pick up Noah next. Thanks for looking after him." My sister's voice came through the line as if from another world. I uttered a phrase as if whispering, "Our dear has gone to heaven." A single tear, which I thought I had under control, spilled over. Unable to comprehend my words, my sister asked back in a bewildered voice over the phone, "Heaven? What are you talking about? That makes no sense." "So our loved one is in heaven while you were enjoying your trip to Hawaii," I said, struggling to contain my emotions. "I don't understand what you're saying," my sister replied, sounding confused. "You'll understand when you get here. The funeral is over, and we're now at the crematorium." "What? The crematorium?" My sister's voice was filled with shock and disbelief, and the phone call abruptly ended. "No, no." My sister rushed out of the taxi, desperation etched on her face. She called out his name and looked around frantically, but Noah wasn't there. "Where is he?" "He's not here." "Of course he isn't," I said softly, pointing in the direction of the crematorium. Though modern crematoriums don't emit smoke like the old ones, there was no mistaking the solemn reality. Someone was being cremated right now. "About Noah. The day you dropped him off, his fever suddenly spiked to 107 degrees Fahrenheit. 107 degrees? My sister's voice faltered. The antipyretic we got from the pediatrician didn't work, and his condition deteriorated rapidly. We called an ambulance in a panic, but no. I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence. "We're in the middle of a funeral right now," I continued, spreading my arms towards the crematorium. "Hey, what's going on? What happened to Noah? Why are you here?" A man shouted, breaking the silence. It was my husband, shock and disbelief evident in his voice. "It doesn't matter why I'm here. What about Noah?" I retorted sharply. "Of course it matters." My husband's voice was strained, filled with urgency and concern. With nothing left to lose, I faced my husband, ready to confront the truth. I shouted back, "What kind of nerve do you two have to abandon your family and go on a fair trip? Noah was sick with a fever, and despite my plea for help, you ignored us and went on your trip. Are you out of your mind? What are you saying?" "I've known for a long time. When I contacted your company, they said you had taken paid leave. When I checked the computer, there was a reservation for a trip to Hawaii, staying on the same flight and in the same hotel as my sister. You think you can explain that away as a coincidence?" At my intense accusation, my husband was left speechless. "Olivia, tell me, is Noah?" His voice broke. "How can you ask that question now? Why do you think we're here? Why do you think we're wearing mourning clothes at the crematorium? Don't you understand?" I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. "No. No." My sister's scream pierced the tense air, collapsing into tears. I looked down at her with cold eyes. "You have no right to cry, Emma. You're the worst kind of person, abandoning your son to go on a trip with your sister's husband." "I was so lonely all by myself. That's why. Emma's voice quivered. "So you laid hands on my husband?" I accused. "What? I did nothing wrong." "I'm not in the wrong," Emma insisted, unbelievably lashing out in anger. "I didn't choose to have a child, nor did I choose to become a single mother. When my ex-husband and I divorced, I wanted him to take custody of Noah, but he refused. So I did my best to raise him on my own. But to think Noah would? No, Emma." The one comforting my crying sister was my husband. It seemed he had no intention of hiding their affair any longer. "Don't be selfish. Our parents and I have helped as much as we can. Leaving the sick child alone to have an affair is no excuse." I lashed out at them. "You don't even realize how despicable you are. You're the worst." "Hey, Olivia, aren't you being too harsh on your sister?" "Emma is shocked because Noah has passed away," my husband interjected. "Shut up. Don't you dare act superior. Just so you know, we're getting a divorce. I'll make you pay for everything you owe, so be prepared." "What? What does that have to do with this?" "It has everything to do with this." I yelled back at him, my sister crying in the background. The situation had become a battlefield. Our parents approached us in the midst of the chaos. My sister, tear-streaked, blamed them. "Dad, Mom, why didn't you take proper care of Noah? Why did you let this happen?" she cried out. Suddenly, a dry slapping sound echoed through the tension. It was our father who had slapped my sister's cheek. Don't be ridiculous. You abandoned your child and yet you blame others. You even went on a trip with your sister's husband. Shameless. I feel ashamed as a father for raising you like this, he condemned her. My sister cried even harder at our father's harsh words. I contemplated slapping my husband, but before I could act, a small boy's voice cut through the turmoil. Mom. My sister turned sharply. There he was. No. Noel, she exclaimed, moving towards him, but the man holding Noel quickly stepped back, out of her reach. Hey, what are you doing, Lucas? I demanded. The man holding Noel was my sister's ex-husband, the man who had divorced her due to their personal conflicts. That's what I should be saying. What are you doing, leaving Noel alone? It's none of your business. Noah is my son too, he argued fiercely. I followed the prevailing opinion that a mother is better because you insisted on not sharing custody, no matter how many times. I warned you, you wouldn't let me see him, and as I feared, it came to this. You have no right to be Noah's mother. Shut up. All you have to do is quietly pay child support. I'll pay whatever it takes for Noah's sake, but you didn't take care of him. You left him alone. You didn't even know how dangerous his condition was, and you were off on a pleasure trip. On that day when Noah's condition suddenly deteriorated, I panicked and called an ambulance. I called my parents and Lucas, Noah's father. While treatment was being given after arriving at the hospital, he was quite surprised when I told him my sister was on a pleasure trip with my husband. Afterwards, Noah, who was discharged from the hospital in good health, was recuperating at Lucas's parents' house. Wait, so Noah is safe, right? I asked my bewildered husband, staring at the crematorium. It's her grandmother, I explained. Our grandmother, who was bedridden due to her advanced age, has been under care at a nursing home. She passed away from old age the other day. Even though she was bedridden, she had a clear mind and doted on her great-grandchildren, Ava and Noah. When we occasionally visited her at the facility, her wrinkled face would crinkle even more. At the sudden farewell, I, my parents, and Ava were unable to cope and just wept. Noah, being just out of illness, didn't attend the funeral. But I called my sister to this crematorium after informing Lucas that Noah was fine, since his fever had completely gone down. You tricked me, my sister accused, staring daggers at us. We were the ones who wanted to accuse her. I didn't hear that Grandma had passed away either. My sister shouted. I called multiple times to tell you that Grandma had passed away, but your phone was turned off. Both of you were unreachable. Even though Grandma was kind to you, it's unacceptable to be late enough. It's mocking me. No, let's go. You'd rather be with Mommy than this man, right, Lucas? I said firmly, trying to take no back from Lucas. It was Father scolding my sister who was confronting Lucas. Are you still thinking that you can keep No with you even after all this? Listen, what you did was on the verge of breaking the law. It's called parental neglect. You failed as a mother. Don't think that you can ever be by Noah's side again. Noah will be raised by Lucas. Dad, no way. We have even hired a lawyer and decided to fully cooperate with Lucas. You are no longer our daughter. Be prepared for us to cut ties, Mom. My sister's face turned pale at the disavowal from her parents. I stood imposingly in front of my sister and husband. My husband and I are getting a divorce. Why don't you two get along? You should be fine not seeing each of your children. After all, you left them behind to go on a trip overseas. Hearing this, my husband started yelling. Wait, Olivia, it was just a moment of weakness, just a fling with Emma. What's most important to me are you and Ava. Then my sister exploded. What did you say? A fling. You said you don't love Olivia anymore, that you only love me. Shut up. I love my daughter. Don't mess with me. My husband and sister resumed their quarrel. We left them arguing and departed with my grandmother's ashes. After that intense dispute, mediation ended peacefully since I had appointed a lawyer. Noah went to his father's place. I thought he would feel sad about being apart from his mother, but he was actually happy. It seemed my sister was completely non-functional as a mother. My husband and I also had our disagreements. He was stubborn, but after being scolded by both sets of parents, he deflated. The final blow came from our daughter. I don't need daddy, Ava declared. Though only 6, she seemed to mature early and understood her father's behavior in her own way. When Ava looked at my husband like he was an insect, I couldn't help but laugh. There was no greater punishment for my ex-husband, who had adored her daughter. He now has the right to see Ava, but whether she wants to see him is up to her. So the dramatic situation came to an end. Ava and I moved back to our parents' home, living peacefully. Our parents were thrilled to have Ava around. Next year, she would start first grade, and we were excited about her school preparation. I also planned to get a job at the same time she started school. Noah visited every now and then with Lucas. His face was unrecognizably bright compared to before, filled with smiles. Meanwhile, while we were living joyfully, it seemed my sister and ex-husband ended their relationship easily. Perhaps it truly was just a fling for my ex-husband. Perhaps he was shocked at being disliked by his daughter, so he easily discarded my sister. However, his affair with his wife's sister became known in his company, and he was deemed to have character problems. He was sent to the provinces, making it even harder for him to see Ava. He deserved it. As for my sister, it seemed she lived like a hollow shell for a while, frustrated by being abandoned by everything. Eventually, she disappeared. We filed a missing persons report, but I had a feeling my sister would never be found. 7 years ago, I got married to my husband. His sister already had kids back then. But right from the start, I felt like I wasn't really part of their family. My sister-in-law made it clear that I wasn't their aunt. She even told her kids that I wasn't their aunt. Because of this, I don't feel close to them like I do with my husband's other siblings' kids, who I treat like my own nieces and nephews. I love spending time with them and being a fun aunt. I've done things like painting their rooms and taking them on trips because I like being creative and making them happy. Even though I'm a mom now, I still love doing these things for my nieces and nephews because they're like my family, and I never really had one before. But when it comes to my sister-in-law's kids, I don't do any of that anymore. I've stopped trying to talk to them because my sister-in-law made it clear that she doesn't want me involved. I don't want to cause any drama or trouble by interacting with them since it seems like she doesn't want us to connect. Now, our kids feel jealous and left out because their cousins have cool stuff in their rooms and get to do fun things, while they don't. When my sister-in-law confronted me about it, she blamed me for making her kids feel that way. I told her it was her fault for creating a situation where I couldn't relate to her kids, and now they're the ones suffering because of it. I reminded her that she's reaping what she sowed, and her kids are the ones paying the price for it. Now she's all fired up, saying this and that. It's clear she's not happy, and honestly, I never wanted my kids to see her as their aunt anyway. The rest of the family just shakes their heads at her antics, but I know this tension isn't helping anyone. I do feel bad for her kids though. I can't help but wonder if I've made things worse. She doesn't see me as family to her kids because we're not related by blood or adoption. I don't think I'm in the wrong here, and it's frustrating to see the family dismiss her behavior. If anyone confronted me about it, I'd explain that I've always respected her role as a parent, even when she asked me to step back from being an aunt years ago. It hurt, but I understood and never crossed any boundaries. It's unfortunate that things turned out this way, but I had to respect her wishes. I didn't set these boundaries, I just followed them. When she complained to OP could have responded, "Do I know you?" But I wonder if the sister-in-law was the only daughter among the siblings. Maybe OP being the first woman to marry into the family triggered her. Over time, as the other brothers got married and had kids, she became less aggressive, but the damage was done. The only reason the sister-in-law regrets it now is because OP turned out to be a fantastic aunt to other children, and the sister-in-law's plan backfired. Actions have consequences. You followed her instructions not to get involved. It seems like the rest of the family knows she's difficult too. Everyone here seems to have their faults. You probably aren't telling the whole story about what's going on between you and your sister-in-law. But it's not fair for either of you to involve the kids. And what about your husband? Does he also ignore his niece and nephew? Why is he supporting either of you acting this way? I couldn't disagree more. The sister-in-law made the choice to exclude OP and is now causing conflict because OP respected the boundaries she set around her kids. Are you suggesting OP should have ignored that boundary? I understand your concern for her kids. Sadly, they suffer because of their mom's actions. But before you try to change anything, consider how your sister-in-law will react. She might turn any contact into something negative. Keep that in mind as you decide what to do next. This situation happened 2 months ago, but he's still upset about it. I'm a 45-year-old woman. I love my oldest son, but he's almost an adult and acts like one. In our family, everyone takes turns doing chores like cooking. washing dishes, and cleaning common areas on different days. Unfortunately, my son dislikes chores and always tries to avoid them. It's been an ongoing struggle. Washing dishes is particularly troublesome. He fills the dishwasher too much, preventing the detergent from reaching the dishes, leading to them not getting clean. I interrupted him quickly and reminded him that the dishwasher sanitizes dishes. My husband supported me, saying, if he wants dinner, he'll eat from his dishes. He often promised to wash some, but I refused, reminding him that he had the chance to clean them properly the night before. I told him to eat from them as they were or skip dinner. He yelled and threatened to make his own food, but I stood firm. Eventually he gave in, reluctantly selecting the least dirty dishes and eating quietly. I felt bad seeing him so disgusted, but I was tired of the wasted time, water, and detergent. It turned out well. His dishes came out perfectly clean afterward. However, he's still angry, and I do feel guilty now. But I'm tired of his deliberate laziness causing problems for everyone else in the house. Am I wrong? You're not wrong, and I think you handled the situation well. However, I disagree with your statement that he doesn't realize his laziness screws over everyone else in the house. He knows, he just doesn't care. He's old enough to understand the consequences of his actions, and it's time he learns. This should have been addressed sooner. If he doesn't face consequences, he won't change his behavior. Instead, he learned that even when I make a mistake, my parents will have to fix it because they need to eat too. What OP did was smart because he's almost an adult, and it's time to learn how to do things properly. The fact that he suddenly knew how to do the dishes correctly overnight shows that he was capable all along but chose not to do them properly. Well done, OP. I grew up in poverty but worked harder than anyone else to achieve success in my personal, financial, and professional life. My family often had to choose between bus fare and a meal. So when I became financially successful, many people approached me for help. I helped them out of compassion and understanding, knowing how much a small gesture can mean to someone in need. However, many of those I helped started to see me as their personal ATM. I never faced this issue with people who were already financially stable. They would have been embarrassed to ask. While I don't spoil my kids, we do live comfortably in a nice house in a good neighborhood, and I expect them to work hard and excel in school. My eldest son, a teenager, got into trouble for telling a peer that he didn't want to be friends because of his financial situation. A teacher overheard and reacted strongly. Unlike that teacher, I took the time to understand the context and facts before responding. My son then began spending time with Austin. Austin would often lament about not having money to participate in activities, so my son would sometimes cover for him. Like when they went to see Top Gun and Austin couldn't afford a ticket, my son paid for him. However, things got uncomfortable when Austin began to expect my son to foot the bill regularly. The tipping point came when they went to iHill with friends, and Austin assumed my son would pay for his meal too. While my son only ordered onion rings, Austin indulged in a full meal, dessert, and milkshake. Later, my son vented to their friends about how little money he receives from me, and yet he still has to work as a tutor, only for Austin to take advantage of his generosity. Consequently, their friends distanced themselves from Austin. A few weeks later, in class, Austin wondered why he wasn't being invited to hang out anymore. My son replied, because he's tired of covering for him. Austin responded, but I'm poor. My son sarcastically remarked, oh, so you're too poor to be friends with? Maybe I should quit school and get a job like him. This exchange prompted a call from the teacher. I clarified the context of the conversation to the teacher, as she wasn't receptive when my son tried to explain it. She labeled my son as mean and threatened detention. I informed her that I would advise my son not to serve detention for this incident and asked her what she planned to do about it. She ultimately dropped the matter. Edit. It's important to note that Austin isn't in extreme poverty. He has access to resources like last year's iPhone. He has the ability to work like other kids at their school, but chooses not to. You're not in the wrong here. Consider discussing with the head teacher the emotional toll on your son, who has been coerced into giving money repeatedly, and how the last incident bordered on theft. Your son deserves support in standing up to emotional manipulation and bullying, and he has the right to end the friendship. The teacher should have heard the whole story before jumping to conclusions. Everyone involved made mistakes here. While your son's outburst might warrant detention, it's not ideal for you to interfere with a teacher's disciplinary actions unless there's a significant issue with her approach. It might be beneficial to help your son improve how he expresses himself to avoid more serious consequences in the future. I agree, your son has the right to stand up for himself. But the way he expressed it could have been kinder. A more effective approach would have been to say something like, "I don't want to be friends with someone who takes advantage of me," which addresses the real issue without targeting Austin's financial situation. Being overly confrontational with someone who feels entitled might lead to further trouble. Given the circumstances, your son's response wasn't entirely unreasonable. It was a sarcastic retort to someone making excuses for their behavior. The teacher's refusal to listen to the full story and her decision to focus on a poorly worded phrase taken out of context didn't help the situation. I know it might sound odd, but I don't think I'm in the wrong here. I just need some other perspectives on this. My brother, who dropped out of high school, recently got married to his wife, who has similar qualifications, at the young age of 19. I'm 23, just to give some context. The situation is complicated, but basically my brother's mother-in-law pushed them into getting married because she wanted a grandchild as soon as possible. Unfortunately, my own mother went along with it, which I find frustrating. Now my new sister-in-law is expecting, which confirms my suspicions. I know I might seem disrespectful, but I'm not happy about it. We're not well off financially. My dad, who used to be assertive, didn't step in to prevent this situation. Ironically, he persuaded me against attending the college I wanted because of the high tuition fees. To cover the wedding costs, my dad borrowed money from my uncle, his brother, and now he's pressuring me to repay it because my brother and sister-in-law, being young and expecting, can't afford to. They told me they're in too much debt to get a loan from a bank, so it falls on me since I'm debt-free with savings and a job. When they brought this up, I didn't say anything. I just laughed and left. Now they're bombarding me with calls and texts asking for financial help, but I refuse to budge. It feels like we're living in completely different realities. It's not about culture or anything like that. Am I wrong for refusing to take out a loan for my family? Definitely not. Goodness, what a chaotic situation. If no one can afford to cover the wedding costs, what about the baby? It seems like they'll keep turning to you for loans they won't repay. Stand your ground. This isn't your problem to fix, so don't entertain further discussions about it. If they can't afford a lavish wedding without a substantial loan, maybe they should prioritize their resources for the baby instead. Laughing in their faces was a fitting response to such a ridiculous request. Oh, please ensure that you're the only one with access to your savings. Secure your accounts with updated passwords and avoid staying logged into online banking on shared devices. It's important to take these precautions, especially if your parents have access to personal information like your social security number and employment history. While you might believe they wouldn't take advantage of you, financial strain can drive people to make unexpected decisions. That's right. If they have your social security number, they could potentially open credit in your name, leaving you in a difficult situation. It's a quick process, but you can easily lock your credit by contacting the major reporting agencies, usually 3 of them, either by phone or online. Reversing the lock is simple when you're ready to apply for loans for things like a home, education, or a car. Their financial irresponsibility shouldn't fall on your shoulders. They need to figure out a repayment plan for your uncle on their own. Growing up, I lived with my best friend and his wife, Amanda, on I-35. While Amanda has always been a friend, I've had a closer relationship with her husband. Unfortunately, they moved out of town years ago, only returning for significant family events like funerals or weddings. A few months back, Amanda visited for her sister-in-law's bachelorette party, despite feeling uneasy about it due to her sister-in-law's mistreatment stemming from jealousy or other issues. Wanting to ease her nerves, I offered to pick her up from the airport and take her out for drinks afterward. However, I made a mistake and forgot to add it to my calendar. I had already planned a date for that night and couldn't cancel it, so I arranged for the sister-in-law's best friend to pick up Amanda and take her to the hotel. 2 days later, I met up with Amanda for drinks. She was feeling really down after her mistreatment at the bachelorette party, where everyone else seemed to ignore her. We spent a few hours chatting and drinking, and then I received a text from my girlfriend, asking me to come over to her apartment. I arranged for a mutual friend to join Amanda at the bar and keep her company before leaving. After that night, Amanda stopped communicating with me. She ignored my texts and social media messages for 3 months. Finally, I decided to ask my best friend about what was going on with his wife. He listed a series of complaints Amanda had against me, including forgetting her birthday multiple times despite Facebook reminders, which she doesn't use, and the incident at the bar where I forgot to pick her up from the airport and left her alone. I explained to my friend that I tend to be absent-minded, and they should have been aware of that by now. I also mentioned that Amanda is overly sensitive and holds onto grudges. I reminded him that I had already apologized to her for everything, so I didn't understand why she was still upset. However, my best friend became angry and is now not speaking to me either. Do you think I'm the one in the wrong here? Leave, you useless old ladies who can't even clean properly. My husband and I, who were living with our eldest son and his wife, were giving $3,000 to help with expenses every month. But his wife would often insult us with hurtful words and make life difficult for us. We were fed up and angry. We didn't want anything to do with her anymore and decided to get back at her someday. My name is Susie. I'm 62 years old and work part-time while also taking care of our home. I live with my husband David, who is the same age as me. David works in an office and is a kind and serious man, so we have a stable income and rarely argue. Our son, Lawrence, is 32 years old. He's just like his dad, kind-hearted and responsible. After finishing university, he got a job at a private company and is working hard. 2 years ago, he married a woman named Emily, whom he met at work. However, it turned out that Emily was actually a very mean person. When we first met her, she appeared to be serious and nice. Lawrence assured us that she was hardworking at her job and had a good relationship with her bosses. Emily is 6 years younger than Lawrence, and although we weren't sure if they would get along, we trusted Lawrence's judgment. After they got married, Lawrence and Emily moved into their own apartment. Emily promised to take care of all the household chores so Lawrence could focus on his work. Lawrence seemed appreciative of her help. He often said, "Thanks to Emily taking care of everything at home, I can concentrate on my job." I'm grateful. My husband and I believed that our son had chosen a good wife. But Emily's true nature began to emerge gradually. We had a family gathering for New Year's, and when I saw Emily, I didn't even recognize her at first. She looked completely different. The last time I saw her, she had black hair and wore minimal makeup, appearing reserved. But now, she had transformed into a bold woman with pink hair, wearing loud bracelets on her wrists. She seemed like a whole different person. My husband, David, and the rest of our family were surprised by Emily's drastic change. Lawrence tried to smooth things over. I'm sorry if this caught you off guard. I was also surprised when I came home from work one day to find Emily like this. But she manages the household well, and we don't have any problems. Plus, Emily is a full-time homemaker. Can we overlook this? After hearing Lawrence's explanation, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Well, if Lawrence is fine with it, then so am I. I was just taken aback by how different Emily looks now. It's not fair to judge someone solely based on appearances, and it's not my place to complain. My family seemed to agree with my sentiment. Later, we all had a good time drinking together until Emily caused a scene. She got extremely drunk and started hurling insults at everyone around her. "You dare to defy me?" I once took down 3 classmates at once back in middle school. It became evident that she had a tendency to become aggressive when intoxicated. She even directed hurtful words at me and David, yelling, "Stop clinging onto life needlessly, you old pests. Nobody is pleased that you're still alive." Her words cut deep. There's a limit to what's acceptable, even under the influence of alcohol. David looked furious, and Lawrence was visibly shocked. "Hey, even for a drunken conversation, you've crossed the line. Apologize." However, Emily didn't even listen to Lawrence. "You dump all the chores on me, then have the guts to lecture me, a weakling like you. I could take you down in a heartbeat." Emily kept on with her verbal assault, causing chaos and trouble for everyone around. Eventually, she passed out from the alcohol and the tension eased, but the mood remained sour. Everyone was furious with Emily. Then one of the relatives brought up Emily's earlier claim about defeating classmates. Was she a troublemaker in the past? They asked. No, Lawrence replied. Emily graduated from a public university. I always thought she was a serious person. But the relative remained doubtful. Do we have any proof she's been on the straight and narrow? Maybe we should dig into Emily's past to see what kind of person she really is. I agreed with the idea. It might be worth looking into, I said. Lawrence promised to investigate further. Since Emily had no living parents and few ties to her relatives, he decided to hire a private investigator. The investigation uncovered that Emily had been quite rebellious during her middle school years and even led a group of troublemakers. She was so infamous that even the local troublemakers followed her lead since she was in ninth grade. Concerned about her future, Emily started to put on a more serious facade. Despite graduating from a public university, she remained connected with her rowdy group of friends. Even now, when Lawrence was at work, Emily would invite these troublesome friends over, causing disturbances that annoyed the neighbors. It became clear that Emily was hiding her true nature. She was indeed a troublemaker. Frustrated by this behavior, Lawrence brought up the idea of divorce. However, Emily reacted with tears and pleading. "I'm sorry. I'll change and be more serious. Please forgive me. I need you, Lawrence. Please don't leave me." She even reverted to her old appearance and deleted her friends' contacts from her phone right in front of Lawrence. She apologized to the relatives she had upset during the New Year's gathering and repeatedly called me to apologize. Seeing her efforts, Lawrence began to reconsider his decision. As a result, Lawrence and Emily decided not to divorce and opted to continue their married life. Since Lawrence was the one married to Emily, my husband, and I felt it wasn't our place to interfere too much. So we respected Lawrence's decision. When I saw Emily again at the family summer gathering, she seemed to have become a more serious person, and I hoped things would be fine from then on. However, one day while I was at my part-time job, I strained my back while lifting a heavy object. The pain was so severe that I couldn't move. My colleagues rushed me to the hospital, where I was diagnosed with a significant back strain and advised to rest. When I called Lawrence to tell him about it, he suggested something unexpected. "Why don't you come and live with us? Both Emily and I, along with Dad, could take care of you. At your age, incidents like these might happen more often, and it would be better if we were there to help." As I pondered the idea, it seemed like a sensible solution. Once my back pain had subsided, my husband, Lawrence, Emily, and I sat down and discussed the idea of living together. We all agreed it made sense, especially considering our spacious single-family home. With no space issues, Lawrence and Emily moved in with us, and we began our shared living arrangement. Initially, everything went smoothly. Emily took on half of the household chores, which lightened my load significantly. My husband and I contributed financially, providing around $3,000 each month to cover expenses. Although my part-time job limited my financial contribution, I wanted to ease the financial strain on Lawrence and Emily as much as possible. However, Emily's behavior started to change gradually. She began claiming she wasn't feeling well and started pushing more of the household responsibilities onto me. Initially, I believed her and took on the extra chores, but I soon noticed inconsistencies. She appeared perfectly healthy, eating hearty meals and even going out for leisure activities all day. Feeling perplexed, I confronted Emily gently, expressing my concerns. "I hate to question this, but are you truly unwell? You seem energetic and spend a lot of time outside." Emily's response was a fierce glare. "Why are you doubting me?" she snapped. "If you keep this up, I'll give you a piece of my mind." I was taken aback by her coarse language. It was evident she felt no remorse. She was likely only pretending to change to avoid losing Lawrence. Emily, sensing my shock, scoffed, "Are you scared, Aria?" "Well, get used to it. I've played the quiet girl for too long. It's time for me to be myself." "You're aware of the consequences if you continue, right, Emily?" It seemed Emily had used intimidation tactics before, perhaps during her school days. This behavior had carried over into adulthood, where she could manipulate others to get her way. While I couldn't deny feeling afraid of Emily, I hadn't lived 62 years to be pushed around. Holding my ground, I warned her sternly, "If your behavior crosses the line, it could be considered a crime, you know? I'm not here to obey your orders like a robot. If you push too far, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities." Emily appeared surprised by my unexpected response, but she quickly fired back, "Shut up, old woman. I'll never forgive you." Her outburst startled David and Lawrence, who rushed to see what was happening. They were both home since it was their day off. After briefly explaining the situation, David and Lawrence frowned. It was decided that the four of us would discuss the matter. Diva. David addressed Emily firmly. Firstly, apologized to Susie. However, Emily refused to apologize. Instead, she crossed her arms defiantly. Why should I apologize to an old woman? I thought Susie would handle the household chores, so I agreed to live together. But my workload hasn't decreased as I expected. It's only gotten worse. Emily's next words were even more shocking. No matter what anyone says, I won't change. From now on, you'll all do as I say. Oh, but Susie and David are useless. You two old hags can leave since you don't even contribute to the household chores. Her words ignited a fire within me. I've had it with this woman. I resolved firmly to seek revenge. My usually calm husband seemed equally furious, his face flushed with anger. Should we leave now feeling the same? He asked. Or should I distance myself from Emily immediately? I nodded in agreement, saying, yes, let's go. My husband and I swiftly packed our belongings and left without delay. Although we said we were moving out, we couldn't take large items like dressers, so we planned to return for them later. Lawrence mentioned he still needed to talk to Emily, so he chose to stay behind. My husband and I headed to a budget hotel for the time being. We didn't own another house, and we didn't want to burden our friends, so we opted to stay there until we found a new place. The next morning, Emily began bombarding my cell phone with calls starting at 8 a.m. Initially, I considered ignoring them, but her persistence was relentless, with 20 calls in just 1 hour. Though I regretted not blocking her number sooner, I felt a twinge of curiosity about her intentions, prompting me to answer once. Hello, is this Susie? Emily's voice sounded unnaturally sweet on the other end. Instantly, I sensed mischief brewing, and frankly, it gave me the creeps. From her serious demeanor to her sudden shift to a cutesy persona, I couldn't help but wonder how many faces Emily could wear. Regardless, one thing was clear. I couldn't trust her, no matter which version showed up. Realizing the futility of continuing the conversation, I simply replied, no, thank you, and promptly ended the call. I blocked her number and barred her from all messaging apps to prevent further contact. My husband, observing my actions, followed suit. As a united front, we decided to cut off all communication from Emily indefinitely. Later in the afternoon, Lawrence called me. Mom, I've divorced Emily. I left the house early this morning and just submitted the divorce papers. He explained that when he had informed Emily of his decision the previous night, her response had been dismissive. Try if you can. With no hesitation, Lawrence proceeded with the divorce. Upon hearing this news, I couldn't help but feel relieved. Staying with someone like Emily would never lead to happiness. I shared with Lawrence that Emily had called earlier, acting strangely cutesy. Lawrence's expression soured at the mention of Emily's behavior. You know, back when Emily was rebellious, she would resort to acting cute to smooth things over with her boyfriend whenever things got awkward. She's incredibly naive if she thinks that tactic will work now that we're all adults. His sentiment resonated with me completely. Emily's been cheating too. What, really? I was genuinely taken aback. The thought that she would add infidelity to her already despicable behavior was beyond belief. Her claims of illness seemed increasingly dubious to me. She appeared perfectly healthy and went out far too often. Suspecting there was more to her story, I decided to hire a private investigator. The results were shocking. Emily had been cheating with an unknown man. Lawrence even provided photographic evidence showing Emily kissing a young man in public, his green hair making him stand out. I warned Emily that I pursue legal action against her, and I fully intend to. I'll also seek damages from her affair partner, Lawrence informed me. As I examined the photos he sent to my phone, Emily's nonchalant attitude in response to the accusations puzzled me. Then why did she call me? I pondered aloud. Who knows? Maybe she wanted to know where I was after I moved out. Emily never expected me to leave. She thought if she acted tough and intimidating, I'd stay, Lawrence surmised. But now that I'm gone for real, I think she panicked and tried to win me back. I sighed deeply. Regardless of her motives, I had no desire to aid someone like her. I hoped she would experience the full weight of loneliness on her own. After some time, my husband, Lawrence, and I managed to secure a new apartment where we could all live together. Initially, we contemplated evicting Emily from our old house and returning there. But considering its size and potential vacancy in the future, we deemed it more practical to sell it off. Lawrence agreed, expressing his willingness to part with the property. Living there isn't a necessity for me. Selling it sounds like the best option, he remarked. As for Emily losing her place, it was of little concern to us. With the help of relatives, we returned to the old house to retrieve our belongings. To our dismay, Emily greeted us with a smug grin, suggesting that we resume living together. I realized I can't bear loneliness. Wouldn't it be better for us all to live together again? Plus, I want to save money and avoid paying Lawrence any alimony, she proposed audaciously. Her bold request ignited my simmering anger. If you're going to make a request, at least do so humbly. This isn't a matter for jest. No matter how you plead, I won't entertain it, I snapped. David, my husband, interjected with a cold tone. We're selling this house, so leave promptly and fulfill your obligations to Lawrence. I could never forgive you. Stop attempting to reignite our relationship. Lawrence echoed his sentiments firmly. Emily's flirtatious facade crumbled at his words. Lawrence has a stable income, so I initially thought marrying him would allow me to relax and become a housewife. But now, there's no ulterior motive. I truly love Lawrence. And of course, I need both of you, Susie and David, Emily insisted. However, her words did little to quell the seething anger within us. Mine, David's, and Lawrence's, only serving to stoke the flames further. In that tense moment, a previously silent relative, who had been observing the situation, couldn't remain silent any longer. They interrupted Emily with a firm voice. Emily, you are a despicable woman. If you have so much to say, why don't we settle this with a fair fight? You seem confident about your strength. With a hint of intimidation, the relative revealed their physical prowess, reminding Emily that they had competed in a national karate competition. This relative in their 30s was well known for their strength, and we had called them in case Emily decided to cause trouble. Sensing the imminent threat, Emily recoiled. No, I don't want to fight. Once you leave, don't ever bother Susie and the rest again. Leave quickly, but before you do, offer a proper apology, the relative warned in a low voice, exuding an intimidating presence. Emily, subdued by the imposing atmosphere, acquiesced with a whimper. Emily's sudden change in demeanor caught us off guard as she swiftly replied, Yes, I understand. I'll leave immediately. I'll leave all my large belongings here. I'm truly sorry, she groveled. Good riddance. Packing her belongings and departing, the relative smirked. It was evident that Emily's tough facade crumbled in the face of those she perceived as stronger. As David, Lawrence, and I watched her retreat, we couldn't help but burst into laughter. With the nuisance finally gone, our moving preparations proceeded seamlessly, and we successfully relocated to our new home without any trouble. Following her departure, Emily rented an apartment and began living alone. True to Lawrence's warning, he filed for alimony, which Emily and her lover promptly paid, likely due to the involvement of a lawyer. It appeared that Emily couldn't stand up to someone with greater power, as my relative had predicted. Since then, I've kept my distance from Emily, but I've heard about her activities through various sources. News reports and conversations with acquaintances have painted a picture of Emily's life following her departure. Initially, Emily depleted most of her savings to fulfill her alimony obligations. With plans to marry her former affair partner and rely on his income, she was left in the lurch when he severed all ties. Desperate for stability, she attempted a job at a private company only to quit abruptly after clashing with her boss. In a shameless bid for financial support, she approached me, my husband, and Lawrence at our workplaces, but we steadfastly ignored her pleas, causing her to eventually give up. Facing mounting debt and rejection from her former associates, Emily's desperation led her to assault one of her gang members in a fit of rage, resulting in her arrest and subsequent imprisonment. My husband, Lawrence, and I couldn't help but feel that she had reaped what she sowed. Emily had a history of troublemaking, never showing any remorse for her actions. It seemed only fitting that she face the consequences of her behavior behind bars, where she could hopefully reflect on her choices. In stark contrast, my husband, Lawrence, and I were enjoying peaceful, contented lives. The three of us lived harmoniously together, and we even had plans for a trip on our next extended weekend. Our apartment offered the convenience of easy cleaning and proximity to the station, making it a wise choice for our new home. We were determined to continue cherishing our tranquil existence as a family of three. My name is Maria Dolphin, and I'm about to turn 27. I've been married for 5 years and have a 4-year-old son named Martin. At first, I worked full-time, but now I work part-time at the same company. My husband is 30 years old, 3 years older than me. Kevin Carlton, who I marry, seemed sweet when we were dating, but things changed after marriage. He became more controlling. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister named Jane Dalton, and he spoils her a lot, maybe because of their big age gap. Before we got married, I didn't really mind how close Jane and Kevin were. But after tying the knot, I started noticing some changes. Jane frequently drops by our place, and I end up scrambling to cater to her every whim because Kevin always caves into her demands. She shows up unannounced, morning or night, without bringing any gifts or even a thank you. She acts like I'm invisible, only talking to Kevin, saying, "Hey brother, I'm here again." Kevin, oblivious to the fact that I didn't prepare dinner for Jane, asks if she wants to eat. When I try to discreetly mention it to Kevin, he brushes it off, leaving me to serve my own dinner to Jane in the end. Then, loud enough for Jane to hear, he blames me, saying things like, "You should have made more food." Jane looks like she's going to cry and apologizes to me. Kevin comforts her and scolds me, saying things like, "You're not considerate," or "Don't be mean to my sister." Even though Jane apologizes, it's clear she feels reassured by how Kevin takes her side. It's like she enjoys it. I end up making my own meal from leftovers while they eat together. Just as I'm about to join them, Jane tells Kevin she wants to talk alone. Kevin moves me and Martin to another room. This isn't the first time. After we finish eating and clean up, I find them chatting on the sofa. They never bothered to clean up after themselves. It feels like they see me as a maid, not a wife or sister-in-law. They don't even talk to Martin. It's like I'm just a maid bringing my kid to work. I was tidying up the kitchen and getting ready to bathe Martin when Kevin suddenly called me, even though it was almost 8 p.m. He said, "Jane wants cake. Go buy it now. Get it from the shop by the station," telling me exactly where to go. But going out to buy cake would make Martin go to bed late. When I hesitated, Jane insisted, "I want it now," and Kevin rushed me, saying, "It's fine if he stays up a bit longer tonight." Then Kevin started yelling at me, blaming me for having an attitude with Jane around. I knew I'd have to go to the cake shop eventually, so I reluctantly agreed. There's a cake shop near the station that closes at 9 p.m. So if I hurry, I can make it. As I was getting ready to go, I overheard them talking, speaking loudly enough for me to hear. They were saying things like, "She's so thoughtless," and "Why did you marry her?" Since I couldn't leave Martin alone, I decided to take him with me. While I was getting Martin ready, I heard Kevin's loud voice from a living room. "If you defy me again, we'll get a divorce." Martin could hear it too. He might not understand the words, but I think he knows his parents are fighting. Trying to control my emotions, I asked Martin, "What kind of cake would you like?" He perked up and said, "Mom, I want a cake with lots of fruits." So on our way to the cake shop, we chatted about cakes, momentarily forgetting about Kevin's words. We made it to the cake shop just before it closed. Luckily, they had the cake Jane wanted. We bought 2 cakes and the fruit-loaded cake Martin desired. When we got back home, I served the cakes to Jane and Kevin. I prepared Martin's cake and brought it to the dining room. As soon as I set it down in front of Martin, Jane pointed at it and said, "Actually, I want that cake." Before I could respond, Kevin moved Martin's cake in front of Jane. Ignoring Martin's protests, Jane started eating his cake. Kevin justified it by saying, "I bought that cake with my money, so I get to choose." Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I expressed my frustration to Kevin and Jane. Kevin then threatened, "We could get a divorce, you know." Martin stopped crying but held my hand tightly, looking worried. Then, after a moment, Martin said, "Mom, I also love cake with strawberries. It's really yummy." He mentioned it while eating the cake that Jane initially wanted. I feel like I'm putting Martin through too much. 3 adults, myself included, shouldn't be subjecting a 4-year-old child to this. When I saw Jane reaching for Martin's cake, I swiftly moved his plate away. Martin happily followed me to another room, saying, "Yummy, let's go over here." Probably Kevin noticed Jane's attempt too. He apologized to her, saying, "Sorry for being so tight-fisted." I wanted to respond, but I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to the word divorce. Seeing Martin innocently enjoying his cake is heartwarming. After he finished, ignoring Kevin and Jane, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. I was about to wake up Kevin and Martin and make breakfast when I heard Martin crying. I rushed to him to find his piggy bank, a gift from my father, broken, and all his saved money gone. It was Martin's nightly ritual to bid goodnight to his piggy bank before going to sleep. Last night was no exception. He said goodnight to it and cuddled up with me. At that time, only Kevin and Jane were in the living room. I asked Kevin about the piggy bank. He responded casually, saying that Jane needed some money, so she took it from Martin's piggy bank. Martin was still crying as I held him close. His pain was so palpable that it brought tears to my eyes. It was agonizing to see Kevin prioritize and cater to his sister Jane over our son Martin. Anger and sadness flooded over me simultaneously. "Why are you making a morning so miserable?" Kevin retorted. "Don't you think you did something wrong? Martin is crying so much." For the first time since we got married, I let my anger out towards him. I had always avoided arguing in front of Martin, but I couldn't stay silent seeing him so hurt. Kevin looked at me intensely, then went to the bedroom without saying a word, returning with something in his hand. To my shock, Kevin handed me divorce papers, something I didn't even know he had stashed away. "If you're not happy with me, then let's get a divorce," he declared, thrusting the papers at me before storming out of the house with a loud slam of the door. Martin, who had never shed tears over the issues with Kevin and Jane, seemed to have reached his breaking point. He had been crying since last night, and it broke my heart to see him in such pain. "Hey Martin, how about we skip daycare today?" I suggested, hoping to bring him some comfort. He eagerly agreed with a loud yes, flashing me a faint smile. As Martin brought a picture book from the shelf and settled onto my lap, he looked up at me with joy and asked, "Today, Mama is the teacher at daycare, right?" His innocence was like a ray of sunshine. I couldn't help but marvel at his resilience. Today, I decided that we would spend the day playing and cherishing each moment together to fill his heart with happiness. I might be causing some inconvenience at work, but when I explained the situation, they kindly granted me a day off, advising me to spend quality time with Martin. In the morning, we headed to the park, played games like hide and seek, and had a blast on the swings and slides. Upon returning home for lunch, Martin seemed tired and soon dozed off on my lap, just like he used to when he was a baby. Normally, I would use this time to catch up on chores. But today felt different, so I decided to cherish the moment and enjoy watching him sleep peacefully. As I started to drift off myself, I was startled by a noise from the front door. It was too early for Kevin to be back, so I felt uneasy. Quickly, I scooped up Martin, and grabbing only my bag with essentials, I hurriedly hid with him in the bedroom closet. I froze as I sensed someone entering the house, holding my breath as I heard a familiar voice. The person seemed to be searching for something, muttering, "I can't find it." Where did the wife hide it? Fear gripped me as I listened to the sound of rummaging, but as I focused on the voice, I recognized it. It was Jane. Questions flooded my mind. Why did she have a key? What was she searching for? I cautiously cracked open the closet door to see what she was up to. She was rifling through drawers and cabinets, then let out a frustrated sigh before making a phone call. "I searched where you said, but it's not there." "Yeah, I checked there too. If it's not there, it's a waste of time." "Okay, got it. Heading home now," she said, mentioning Kevin's name. Kevin? I wondered what they were searching for. I heard the front door lock, and when it was safe, I put Martin to bed and pondered the strange events. I was certain Kevin was involved in whatever they were looking for. If they were searching for something unknown, could it be one of my possessions? Despite their earlier conversation, I couldn't decipher why Jane had suddenly appeared at our house. Kevin felt like a stranger to me, and I was overcome with a mix of disgust and fear towards him. Hastily, I packed the essentials for Martin and myself. By the time Martin woke from his nap, I was ready to leave. "Martin, let's go to Grandpa's house," I said, and we made our way to the station, catching a train to my parents' home. Thankfully, it was just 2 stops away, so we arrived swiftly. Since I hadn't informed them beforehand, my parents were surprised, but they sensed something was wrong and welcomed us without prying. Their dog, a favorite of Martin's, greeted him eagerly, and they began playing together. Watching them, I felt a sense of relief and proceeded to recount everything that had happened with Kevin and Jane. "Perhaps Jane was searching for your bank cards," my mother suggested. It made sense. Before getting married, I had founded a successful online shop for handmade goods with friends. As the CEO of the handmade industry, I gained recognition, but when the shop flourished, I decided to focus on raising my child. I've entrusted my company to trusted friends while I focus on raising my child. I work part-time and handle most tasks from home. Though I'm still the CEO, Kevin is unaware of this. He knows about my previous role and likely suspects I have savings. I've informed him that I receive assistance from the company but left out the CEO details, letting him assume I stepped down. I haven't disclosed the full extent of my CEO position or savings to Kevin for a reason. Shortly after our marriage, I discovered his poor money management skills. He spends everything he earns. He allocates only $200 monthly for food expenses and suggested I quit my job to be a full-time housewife, an idea I never agreed to given the financial strain of such a small allowance. After some persuasion, he reluctantly agreed to let me work part-time at my current company. To ensure I wouldn't consider divorce, he even had me sign a post-marital property waiver with a lawyer. Since Martin's birth, I've been allotted only $200 for food expenses. Consequently, I've been using my savings to cover Martin's nursery fees and clothing expenses. I've refrained from asking Kevin for money beyond the food budget, leading him to assume I have substantial savings. Jane appears to be in dire need of money, and with Kevin's belief in my savings, they may be searching for my cash cards. It all makes sense now. I maintain a separate savings account dedicated to slowly accumulating funds for Martin's future. A portion of my salary is automatically deposited into this account each month. Given their financial circumstances, it's highly likely they are seeking my cash cards. No matter how hard Jane or Kevin search, they won't find my valuables because I always keep them close, including my cash cards. However, there's still an unresolved issue. Jane might be entering our house even when we're not there, possibly with Kevin's knowledge. Following my father's advice, I decided to store my valuables in my parents' safe. Why are they so desperate for money? As I pondered this question, Martin tearfully approached my father, explaining that his piggy bank had been broken, and he couldn't keep his promise to save up. My father's face flushed with anger upon hearing Martin's story. "I'll call Kevin and talk to him," my mother suggested. While chiding my father, "Let's find out their motives." She reasoned that since Kevin had mentioned divorce, he might try to blame us and make the divorce more favorable for himself. Therefore, it's essential to calmly uncover their motives now to prevent them from escaping with excuses later on. I decided to secretly record their conversation to uncover their motives. My parents suggested consulting a lawyer who was a longtime family friend. Once back home, I started cooking dinner as usual when Kevin returned. I discreetly began recording on my phone, keeping the screen face down to avoid detection. To my surprise, Kevin immediately asked me where I kept my cash cards. When I questioned his sudden interest, he provided vague answers, attempting to deceive me. Remaining silent, I watched as Kevin's demeanor shifted to one of numbness and sadness. "Give me all your part-time earnings for my sister," he demanded, but I refused, explaining that the money was for Martin's savings. This enraged Kevin, who then angrily pushed divorce papers toward me from his bag. "You're relying on my money, so don't defy me," he retorted, dismissing the importance of saving for Martin. His words implied a greater value placed on Jane over Martin, leaving me stunned and disheartened. Upon hearing Kevin's words, I halted my meal preparations, calmly placed the divorce papers into the bag I had prepared earlier, and grasped Martin's hand, leading him to the door. Kevin's voice boomed behind us, declaring, "I'm serious about the divorce. Don't ever return." In response, I asserted, "I won't return to a home where anyone can come and go as they please," before departing. Was it too harsh to label my sister-in-law as a stranger? Following my departure, I was bombarded with messages and calls from Kevin, all of which I chose to ignore. I powered off my phone and sought refuge at my parents' house. There, I played the recording of Kevin's conversation and showed them the completed divorce papers. My parents simply advised, "Do as you see fit." I didn't harbor any love or affection for Kevin, but I still cared deeply for Martin. Some advised me to divorce Kevin to spare Martin's feelings, but I feared that divorcing could also hurt Martin. Amidst this inner turmoil, Martin voiced his hunger, prompting my mother to whip up his favorite dish, hamburgers. Tears welled up in my eyes as my mother, with a gentle smile, said to Martin, "I made these hamburgers so you and Mom can visit us anytime." After taking a bite, Martin beamed and exclaimed, "Grandma's hamburgers are the best. I want them every day," his joyful words tugging on heartstrings. I replied, "It's because these hamburgers are made with all the love I have for you," as he sweetly fed me a bite. Overwhelmed by his kindness, tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. I tried to suppress them, but they kept flowing. My father reassured Martin, who was alarmed by my tears, saying, "Mommy is crying because she's so happy you gave her this hamburger. These are tears of joy, not sadness," he explained tenderly. Martin, in his innocence, remarked, "This hamburger is so yummy. If Jane were here, she'd love it too." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back my tears, and I embraced him tightly, while my father's eyes filled with emotion. Turning to Martin, I said, "Being with family is a blessing, isn't it?" He looked puzzled and asked, "Didn't Dad say only Jane is family? Is my family just Mom, Grandpa, and Grandma?" My father responded gently, "Yes, that's right," then asked Martin, "Would you like to stay here with us as family?" Martin chuckled and replied, "Of course. We're family," bringing smiles to everyone's faces. When was the last time we had such a natural meal? When did we last enjoy a meal filled with endless laughter and conversation? Despite contemplating divorce, the happiness of this meal persuaded me to finally part ways with Kevin. I planned to break the news to Martin, though the thought weighed heavily on my heart. Surprisingly, Martin seemed to understand and embrace the idea of divorce, expressing, "We'll still be a family." He happily cuddled our pet dog, affectionately referring to him as his little brother, despite the dog being older. With resolve, I began preparations for the divorce. Firstly, I promptly contacted a lawyer who was a friend of my father, arranging to meet the following day. That night, Martin slept with my father and the dog, their faint laughter bringing me comfort as I lay in bed with my mother, reminiscing about my childhood. The next morning, upon checking my smartphone, I found over 200 missed calls and messages from Kevin, reflecting his emotional turmoil. Just the sight of it drained me, prompting me to switch off my phone once more. Today, I met with the lawyer, discussing the details and confirming my decision to divorce. We finalized the paperwork, and the lawyer will meet with Kevin tomorrow to proceed. After some time, the lawyer visited my parents' house to discuss the situation. It turned out that Jane had accrued a substantial debt from gambling and excessive shopping, with Kevin serving as her guarantor. When Jane couldn't make the repayments, they devised a plan to tap into my savings. Now, Kevin wants me and Martin back and is retracting his desire for a divorce, the lawyer explained. However, the divorce papers I had submitted earlier had already been processed. When asked if this meant the divorce was finalized, the lawyer confirmed it, stating, "Yes, it's been accepted." Kevin appeared to break down, expressing his fear of losing me to another man. Despite his emotional plea, knowing that everything was settled brought me a sense of peace. I anticipated arguments over child support, but Kevin even pledged to pay $340 to support Martin every month. Later, Kevin called me. Feeling relieved after the divorce proceedings, I decided to speak with him briefly. His tone was no longer aggressive. Instead, he spoke calmly. He confessed that he believed keeping me financially dependent would prevent me from seeking a divorce. He also acknowledged his tendency to spoil his younger sister, Jane, as a misguided form of sibling love. He admitted feeling jealous of Martin, fearing he had lost me to our son. "Once I've resolved Jane's debts, I'll come back for you. Please don't remarry until then," he pleaded. However, I firmly reiterated that I no longer loved him and wouldn't reconsider our relationship. Before hanging up, I could hear him sobbing softly as he whispered, "Please be happy. Did I manage to stay strong until the end?" Discussing future plans with my parents, I decided to remain at their house until Martin grows up, and he transferred to a different nursery. Returning to my role as company president, I explained the situation to my colleagues. Later, I learned that Kevin and Jane had disclosed the divorce and their debt to their parents, resulting in their disannulment. More than the financial issues, their parents were incensed about never seeing their grandson again. Now, Kevin and Jane, once close, reside in a modest apartment, constantly blaming each other. Their actions have led to their own downfall. Today, I find happiness in being with my family. Do you really think a company would hire the child of a poor single mother like you? My goal was to work at the same bank where my father worked, but during my final interview, the notorious demon instructor said this to me, It was clear he looked down on me for coming from a single mother household and had no intention of hiring me. I struggled to keep my composure as the interview worsened. Reaching my limit, I took out my phone and called my father. You see, my father is actually the president of the bank. My name is Emma Miller. I'm a 23-year-old college senior searching for a job. My parents divorced last year, making my mom a single mother. They both wanted to live their own lives, so I naturally stayed with my mom. Despite the divorce, my future plans were heavily influenced by my father, the CEO of the largest bank in the country. I admired him and aspired to work at his bank. Tomorrow, I have my final interview. I'm not the best student, and when I shared my goal of working at the bank, my teachers and peers not only tried to dissuade me, but also ridiculed me. I thought the ordeal would end after the interview, but looking back, it was truly awful. One day during my college years, a friend named Julia asked, "Hey Emma, have you decided where you're going after graduation?" For me, there's only one choice. The bank, I replied confidently. But our conversation drew murmurs from those around us. Just as I wondered if I had said something strange, Julia spoke up again. "Emma, it's hard to say, but you should know your place." To my shock, someone I considered a friend was insulting me. As I tried to argue back, another classmate chimed in. "It's impossible for you. That bank is the largest in the country and the hardest to get into from this university. Only one person from here has been hired in the past 10 years. I knew that, of course. I hadn't told anyone that my father was the bank's CEO. If I did, people would assume I got in through nepotism, which would tarnish my father's reputation and make me feel inadequate. I hated being misunderstood and judged unfairly. "Emma, I'm saying this for your own good," Julia continued, but I cut her off. "I don't need your advice." Everyone's eyes were on me, their cold stares piercing my heart. Why do I have to hear this? I thought, as our teacher, noticing the commotion, approached. "What's going on here?" she asked. "Miller says she wants to work at North Trust Bank," the boy answered. The teacher's face tensed up. "Are you taking society for granted?" Even the teacher, who was supposed to support students, denied my dream. There was no one to stand up for me. "Well, if I want to go there, what's wrong with that?" I retorted, determined to defend my ambition. I objected, but the teacher continued, piling on more criticism. "You're naive," she said. "My father is an interviewer for North Trust Bank. They call him a demon interviewer," she added with a smug look. The teacher's surname was Anderson, a 29-year-old woman. If I encountered an interviewer with the same surname at North Trust Bank, it would likely be her father, a demon interviewer indeed. "Yes, that's right," she continued. "My father doesn't like new talent. He says it's good enough if he interviews 100 people and hires 2. "Is that at the Sun Plaza branch?" I asked, curious about the connection. "Yes," she replied, "and you're from a single mother household, right?" I wondered why she would ask that, but answered honestly, "Yes." Then the teacher showed a sinister smile. At that time, I had no way of knowing the reason for her smile. The argument ended with the bell signaling the start of class. From that moment on, the way people looked at me grew colder. My friends, starting with Julia, whom I thought was a close friend, and my classmates who attended classes with me, distanced themselves. It was as if they didn't want to associate with a fool. Their reactions worsened with each exam I passed. The North Trust Bank hiring process had 4 stages. A written test in the first stage, followed by 2 interviews with people from the head office for the second and third stages. The 4th and final stage was an interview with the hiring manager for the desired work area and the head office hiring manager. In other words, the highest-ranking hiring manager. I wanted to work at the Sun Plaza branch and had managed to pass the 3rd stage. "How did you pass the 3rd stage?" they asked, now surprised and anxious about my progress. Most of them had failed their desired company's 2nd stage interviews. It had been 3 months since the job hunting season began, and in my class alone, there were no confirmed hires. The atmosphere was filled with panic, envy, and jealousy. I could be the first one to get a job offer. Those who had been so arrogant now ostracized me even more due to their pride. However, I got used to that life at university and decided to focus solely on myself. My motivation was to get an offer from North Trust Bank. My mind was set on that goal. One day, after class, Teacher Anderson started attacking me in front of everyone. "All right, everyone, listen up," she shouted to the students preparing to leave. Everyone turned around, curious about what was happening. Emma Miller has cleared the third round of North Trust Bank's exams, she announced. The atmosphere around us suddenly became heavy, but with her next statement, everyone seemed to catch their breath. But it seems she'll fail the fourth round. Huh? What do you mean? I muttered involuntarily. Seeing my reaction, the teacher twisted her face into a sneer. The interviewer for the fourth round has been decided. It's my father, the demon instructor Anderson. The surroundings erupted in surprise and cheers. Serves you right. Know your place. Good. The classroom filled with voices condemning me in unison. I couldn't believe it. Everyone I thought were my friends had turned their backs on me during this job hunting process, even though I had done nothing wrong. Despite that, those around me harassed me and hurled abusive language at me. At first, I thought it might be a way for them to relieve the stress of job hunting. But it was different. I realized the situation around me was rooted in jealousy. They were envious of me for challenging something they wouldn't dare to. There's no way I could lose to someone like her who isn't even good at studying. There's no way someone like her could get into North Trust Bank. If she can make it, then so can I. If Miller is going, I should have tried as well. But that place is difficult. It's the most challenging. It's impossible. So why is Miller trying without hesitation? It's wrong. She's trying for a place that even I can't get into. I can't forgive that. It's strange. The reality became apparent as job hunting progressed. Among those who passed, those who failed, and various others, no one here had much hope. I was being attacked because of jealousy. The final straw was the teacher's words and actions, especially since her father was in charge of hiring at North Trust Bank. If the teacher led the attack on me, the students overflowing with jealousy would just follow her lead. On that day, I finally couldn't take it anymore and stormed out of the room. When I returned home, my mother gently encouraged me. Wrapped in her warmth, I cried. I took a break from university for a while, and before I knew it, the day of the final interview had come. Don't forget, just do your best, my mother said as I left the house. Upon arriving at the interview venue, I was guided to the waiting room. Initially, there had been nearly 300 applicants in the Sun Plaza area, but now only about 10 remained. Only 3 would be selected from this group. Just as I was about to close my eyes to concentrate, my name was called. Please come in. Hello, thank you. I greeted as my final interview began. There were 3 people in the room. Anderson, the teacher's father, just as she had said, a man who appeared to be the chief hiring officer, about 10 years younger than my father, and a man in his 30s, presumably in charge of keeping records, sitting at a slight distance with a computer. The interview began with typical questions from Anderson, starting with a self-introduction and my motivation for applying. I answered these questions without difficulty. Then, the complaints started suddenly. I don't really like female bank employees, Anderson said. Not knowing what to say, I fell silent. Because they have quiet voices, are physically weak, and many think they can please people just by serving tea, he continued. I realized this man must be the type to mistreat his subordinates, and this would be a stressful interview. Silence is taboo in an interview, so I racked my brain and tackled the situation. I was in a sports club, and I think I'm strong. I'll do my best with any job given to me, just like a man. I tried to appeal, responding flexibly to his complaints. However, he didn't find it amusing and clicked his tongue, directing his gaze toward the papers in his hand. I felt something was off at this point. This interview was clearly going too far, yet the chief hiring officer, who should have been higher ranking than Anderson, said nothing. Upon closer observation, the chief hiring officer looked younger than Anderson. Maybe Anderson was pressuring him too. That's what I thought, but there was nothing I could do about it. I could only sit quietly and endure the interview. After a brief silence, Anderson spoke again. It seemed he would be in charge of the entire interview. You seem to come from a single-mother household, am I wrong? He asked, probably looking at the documents I submitted from the university. They included my address and family composition. Yes, my parents divorced, and now I live with my mother, I replied. As soon as he heard my words, Anderson began to laugh, his sinister smile echoing through the room. I see you're from a single-mother household. What business does a poor person have here? He blatantly changed his attitude. As the teacher's sinister smile crossed my mind, I began to sweat. I struggled to find the correct response and began to feel anxious, but it was Anderson who started talking first. Do you think there's a company that would hire someone from a poor single-parent family like you?" He mocked. "Huh? Just because I'm from a single-parent family, I won't be hired. You're going to assume I'm poor." I couldn't help but raise my tone. Of course, Anderson reacted to that. It was as if he had been waiting for me to fight back. "Should I take your attitude as defiance toward me, your interviewer?" I was frustrated but couldn't say anything back. This was the bank my father worked at, the one I had always admired. I didn't want to lose because of this one man, but I didn't know what to say in return. "Why don't you say something?" Anderson further pressured me. The moment I heard those words, something inside me snapped. My consciousness fell swiftly, and I became incredibly calm to the point where I couldn't believe it myself. "Understood," I said. Anderson seemed puzzled by my response. While staring at him, I stood up from the hard metal chair. "Hey, what's with you suddenly standing up?" he asked. Finally, another person spoke. "Have you been sitting the whole time? You've finally gone mad, huh? What do you plan to do?" "I know about you because I've heard from my daughter," Anderson said, revealing that the teacher had shared information about me. "Is this not a leak of information?" I thought, but it didn't matter now. I took my phone out of my bag and suddenly started making a call. "What are you doing? Making a phone call? Are you mocking this interview? Stop it now, or I'll reject you right here." Anderson threatened me, but I wasn't fazed at all. I spoke into the phone. "Hello, Dad. Your father is here. What can a person from a single-parent family do?" Clinging to their separated father. Was that the laugh from the hiring manager? Yes, that's right. A guy named Anderson. "Hey, Dad, can you come to the interview room now?" Of course, he agreed. "I just finished visiting a nearby branch, so I'll be there in 10 minutes. Wait for me, okay?" my father said before I hung up the phone. The person in charge of the recording stared at me with wide eyes, surprised by the unusual scene. But of course, the one who reacted the most was Anderson. Pointing at me, he said, "You're finished. Making a phone call during an interview? Unprecedented. There's no way you'll pass. Go home and go to bed or something." I finally decided to argue back. I couldn't take it anymore. "This isn't even an interview. It's you who's finished, Mr. Anderson." The chief hiring officer and the recorder were astonished by my sudden confrontation with the interviewer. Judging by their expressions, no one had stood up to this man's abusive behavior until now. The recorder's eyes were shining. Were they expecting Anderson to be punished? Anderson slammed his right hand on the table with all his might, a loud thud echoing throughout the room. The men were surprised, but I didn't flinch. "Brian Wilson, you know him, right?" I asked. For a moment, Anderson looked as if I had hit a nerve. He immediately countered, "Are you mocking me? There's no way anyone wouldn't know the president of this bank." To Anderson, who was confidently showing off his composure, I added, "So if my last name was Wilson until recently, would you think it's a coincidence?" Time seemed to stop for the three of them. The chief hiring officer and the recorder stared at me with wide eyes. Anderson then stood up from his chair and muttered, "What did you say?" His face showed a somewhat uneasy expression. "Emma Wilson. That was my full name until recently. My father is Brian Wilson, the president of the bank. 63-year-old Brian Wilson." "You've got to be kidding. This can't be happening." Anderson let out a strange scream. This was no longer an interview. At that moment, my father entered the room. As the door opened, he said words that echoed my own feelings. "This is hardly an interview at all. Mr. Wilson, thank you for your hard work," the two men said, standing up to greet my father as soon as they saw him enter. I looked at my father and felt the extraordinary presence he commanded. The president of the bank stood before us, and Anderson's face turned pale. His mouth hung open in shock. My father then spoke to him. "Hey, Anderson, what were you doing to my daughter, huh?" My father was a big man who had practiced judo. With his shaved head and a scar on his forehead, he looked intimidating. His deep, resonant voice was one that everyone found frightening, even the once confident Anderson. "Why, yes, sir," Anderson squeaked out, unable to maintain his composure. "I don't want to hear your excuses," my father cut him off. He then turned to the man who appeared to be the chief hiring officer. It was the first time I learned his name, Green, from the nameplate that had been bent and hard to read. "Green, aren't you the chief hiring officer? Have you let this tyrant run wild until now?" my father demanded. "I'm very sorry," Green replied, bending at a 90-degree angle and bowing. The young clerk in the room looked terrified, even though he had done nothing wrong. He was drenched in sweat. "Hey, clerk, what's your name?" My father called out in a gentle voice, which only made it more terrifying. "My name is Harris." "Mr. Harris, can you send today's interview record to my PC? You're also recording the audio, right?" My father asked. I later learned that this bank's interviews were not only transcribed, but also recorded as a backup. Thanks to that, Anderson's misconduct was exposed, and he was punished. Anderson was trembling, like a frog stared down by a snake. "Hey, Anderson." "Yes, what is it?" Anderson stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He was a completely different person from earlier. "Apologize to my daughter. It's not because she's my daughter, okay? You've trampled on the feelings of young people who want to join this bank," my father commanded. At my father's words, Anderson bowed deeply and apologized. "Sorry. But I couldn't forgive him, even after seeing that." "Dad, I can't forgive him," I said firmly. When I murmured, weakly, my father nodded in understanding. Walking up to Anderson, he seemed like a lion about to hunt a small animal. "Do you know what will happen to you if you do something like this, Anderson?" My father's pressure made Anderson freeze. "You didn't just do this to my daughter, right? We'll see later in the records. But how many victims have you had besides her?" No one could intervene in this interrogation-like scene. Even I, his daughter, could barely watch in silence, feeling disgusted. Anderson began to speak to my father, sweat pouring down his face. "At least over 100 people," he admitted. I was shocked to hear that he had done the same thing to more than 100 people. Furthermore, the fact that he was left unchecked made me doubt the hiring practices of this company. I felt distrustful, even though it was my father's company. "Hey, Green," my father called out. "Yes? I'm busy with overseas projects, so I trusted you and left the hiring to you. Well, this is my mistake in choosing people. It's my fault that it ended up like this. So I'll take responsibility and reform personnel so there won't be any more victims like this. You two should be prepared for punishment, okay? And Anderson, I'll never forgive you." Anderson gasped, frightened. My father continued, "I plan to gather all the victims and create a victims group. I'll bravely make it public in the media. I'm prepared to face any consequences, so you should be prepared too, right?" Hearing this, Anderson collapsed on the spot as if he had lost his sanity. My father moved away from him and opened a window. Oxygen returned to the tense room. Everyone had seemingly forgotten to breathe. And so, my job interview ended. By the way, I passed. It wasn't due to my father's favoritism. It was apparently the result of a discussion among hiring managers from all areas based on the recorded audio. As a result, the hiring decisions of those who were rejected by Anderson were also reconsidered. The news broke the next day, and my father bowed in front of the media. Many people were impressed by his attitude, and he continued as the bank president. On the other hand, Green, who had been the chief hiring officer, voluntarily resigned, and Anderson was sued by the company and the victims group. Anderson, whose past tyranny was gradually exposed, was arrested for defamation. Meanwhile, at the university, the teacher with a forced smile congratulated me in front of everyone. At that moment, my father and the principal appeared in the classroom. "Miss Anderson, this is Brian Wilson, the president of North Trust Bank," the principal introduced. "Oh yes," Miss Anderson replied, her expression faltering. "I've seen him on TV, so I know who he is. Emma Miller's father." "What? What did you say?" I added to the surprise of the teacher's words. "He's my mother's ex-husband and my father." My words caused a stir in the class. Humans have a tendency to flatter those with power. When they realized I was the daughter of the bank's top executive, everyone in the classroom became agitated. It was as if they had wished they had been friendlier to me. "Miss Miller's father is the president of North Trust Bank," the teacher said upon learning the truth, becoming an empty shell. The principal then addressed the teacher. "This school is able to operate thanks to the support of Mr. Wilson's bank. But it seems you've been bad-mouthing Mr. Wilson's daughter along with the rest of the class, haven't you? Well, that is never mind the excuses. Tell me only the truth. Is it a fact?" Pressed by the dean, the teacher finally hung her head and admitted, "Yes. Mr. Wilson wants to discontinue support for this school. If those who harassed Miss Miller voluntarily leave the school, he says the support will continue. What will you do?" The choice was clear to me as I listened. The teachers seemed to understand as well and ultimately resigned from the school, effective immediately. As they left, they apologized to me, but their voices were so quiet that I couldn't make it out. In the end, more than half of the classmates who had attacked me together withdrew voluntarily from the school. When my father said those who don't come forward before my daughter names the culprits will be considered for legal action, one by one they confessed. Given the power on display, it was a natural outcome. Ultimately, those people escaped legal action, but their enrollment in the university was not recognized. With my father's help, I secured a job offer, and my path after graduation was set. All that's left is to do my best for the remainder of my college life. My life is just beginning. I vowed in my heart to do my best to someday become an exemplary banker like my father. As Mary, nearing her late 50s, reflects on her life, she finds herself at a turning point. With her 2 children, one on the brink of marriage and the other thriving in college, she senses her motherly duties waning. As a former nurse, she contemplates a return to caregiving, feeling the pull of her profession once more. However, life throws her a curveball when she receives distressing news. Her father-in-law, Bob, has suffered a stroke. Rushing to the hospital at her husband John's urgent call, Mary's thoughts swirl with concern. Bob, always a pillar of kindness and warmth, has been grappling with the loss of his wife, Alice, for the past 3 years. Despite Mary's efforts to uplift his spirits through family gatherings and outings, she's noticed a gradual decline in Bob's energy. Just as she begins to see glimmers of his old vitality returning, the news of his stroke hits her like a thunderbolt. Arriving at the hospital, she finds Bob's daughter and son-in-law engaged in conversation, a mix of emotions swirling within her. "Apologies for my tardiness. How's Bob holding up?" I gasped out, hurting to catch up with John's sister, Isabella. Her response was a sigh of irritation as she glanced my way. Clearly annoyed. "You're late. We're in a hurry. Can you handle this?" With that brisk dismissal, she hurried off, leaving me behind. Isabella's indifference towards Bob was palpable, a demeanor she carried even when Alice, Bob's late wife, was alive. Despite Bob and Alice's unwavering kindness, Isabella remained aloof, untouched by their warmth. Left alone in the waiting area, I paced nervously, my thoughts consumed by Bob's condition. Meanwhile, John rushed in, his concern evident in the beads of sweat on his forehead and his silk dress shirt. "Mary, how's Dad?" he asked anxiously. I shook my head, indicating I had no updates yet. John's reaction was visceral. He dropped the bags he was carrying, his complexion draining of color. "No, that's not what I meant," I reassured him quickly. "He's still in surgery. We're waiting for news." Relief washed over John, evident in the way he retrieved his fallen bags and slumped into a nearby chair. "Should we brace ourselves?" I hurried over to John, who teetered on the edge of tears, and placed a comforting hand on his back. "It'll be all right," I murmured, feeling utterly helpless with no words substantial enough to offer solace. Hours ticked by before the surgery's conclusion, and we were ushered into a small room by the doctor for an update. "The surgery went well, but there may be lasting effects," the doctor explained gently, indicating that Bob would require ongoing care. While our hearts hoped for Bob's swift recovery, the reality of caregiving loomed, a responsibility that would involve Isabella and her husband. John and I decided to reach out to Isabella to discuss the next steps. After a conversation, we agreed to convene at Bob's home, a gathering necessitated by the circumstances while Bob remained hospitalized. "I won't be his caregiver," Isabella declared bluntly, sending shockwaves through John and me. "But what are we supposed to do then?" I countered, baffled by her indifference. Isabella, nonchalant, continued toying with her meticulously manicured nails, a stark contrast to the gravity of the conversation. Her husband, Tom, simply nodded along. "What about a nursing home?" I suggested, met with Isabella's vehement refusal. "I'm not wasting money on that. This is what happens whenever I get involved," she snapped, shooting me a venomous glare. "It's like my opinion doesn't matter, so I keep quiet. If he can't go to a facility and neither of you will care for him, what's the plan?" John pressed, frustration seeping into his voice. "That's why you should handle it. I don't want some burden in my home," Isabella chuckled callously, pushing me to my breaking point. "Enough. He's your father, for heaven's sake," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I don't care. Why am I expected to bear the responsibility just because he's my father? He's John's father too. I've been saying you two should handle it." I don't have a response to that. We'd love to care for him at home, but our house isn't equipped for it, I explained, feeling the weight of reality pressing down. There are too many obstacles, stairs, uneven floors, to bring my father-in-law here. We need significant renovations and we simply can't afford it. Mary, you're trained in caregiving, aren't you? It shouldn't be a big deal, Isabella remarked smugly, her tone grating on my nerves. John shared my frustration, and we silently agreed to table the discussion for now, retreating from his parents' home. What's our next move, Mary? You mentioned considering a return to caregiving, John inquired, his concern evident. It's not just about the job. We have to make this place safe for Dad, and that's a financial challenge, I replied, trying to reassure him. You're right, John conceded, acknowledging the daunting road ahead. I estimate it could cost around $100,000. That's just a ballpark figure, but considering the modifications needed for the entire first floor to accommodate him, that's roughly what we're looking at. I mused aloud, grappling with the daunting financial reality. With our eldest still in college, we simply don't have that kind of money. We're still paying off the mortgage, and the thought of taking on another loan for renovations is overwhelming. It's a difficult decision, but should we consider a facility for him? The question is, would he even be able to get in? The waitlists are long, and the expense is significant, and I doubt Isabella and her family would offer any assistance. It feels like we're stuck with no viable solution. Deciding to at least listen to my father-in-law's perspective, I made my way alone to the hospital where he was admitted. Stepping into his room, I was greeted by a sight that lifted my spirits. My father-in-law, visibly improved, greeted me with a warm smile. Please don't apologize, my father-in-law would often murmur upon my visits. There's no trouble at all. And look, I've brought you one of your favorite books today. Why apologize? You're bringing me joy, I'd respond, trying to uplift his spirits. The doctor had informed us of his stroke, leaving him unable to move the right half of his body independently. To read, he'd prop the book on the table, using a weight to keep the pages steady. Ah, thank you, my father-in-law replied gratefully, accepting the book I'd brought. I gently placed the book by his pillow. Dad, I came today because I wanted to talk about what lies ahead, I began, meeting his warm smile with a heavy heart. Oh, I understand. I'll be fine, even in a nursing home. I've prepared for it, so please don't worry, he reassured me, though I sensed a flicker of loneliness in his eyes. Well, Dad, if you're open to it, why not come stay with us? I have experience in elderly care, and as a stay-at-home mom, I have the time. John will be there too. Let's live together, I blurted out, sensing his solitude. His surprise was evident, perhaps realizing deep down that returning to his own home, where Isabella and her husband resided, might not be feasible. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd view him as a burden, ultimately leading to a nursing home. The thought weighed heavily on me, overshadowing my initial intention to listen to my father-in-law's wishes. There was a twinge of guilt toward my husband John, but I knew he'd understand. Now, we needed to arrange for his care upon discharge. Money was a concern, so I decided to seek Isabella's input. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I made my way home. When John returned from work, I recounted the events at the hospital. He appeared troubled but nodded, almost as if he had anticipated this turn of events. Without delay, John dialed Isabella's number. We're reaching out for assistance because we'll be the ones caring for Dad, John explained, his voice tinged with frustration as their conversation escalated. With a resigned sigh, he ended the call and briefed me on their exchange. Isabella refused to contribute any funds. It seems there's little we can do about it, he disclosed, his concern evident as he contemplated the financial implications for his father-in-law. From then on, our home buzzed with activity. We deliberated over renovations, essential care supplies, and received guidance on home care options. When I informed my father-in-law that he'd be moving in with us upon discharge, his expression was a mix of gratitude and regret. Mary, could you fetch the checkbook from over there? He requested, gesturing toward a cloth bag on the shelf. Curious as to why he'd need it, I obliged, retrieving the checkbook during one of our visits. Observing my father-in-law, I watched as he opened the bank book and presented it to me. I have some savings here. Could you and John make use of it? The figure written in the checkbook was staggering, surpassing any amount I'd ever seen. Stunned, I must have appeared frozen, prompting my father-in-law to chuckle. You and John will be looking after me now, won't you? I heard about the new car, the renovations to make the house accessible. Would $10 million cover it? $10 million. The zeros overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless. I couldn't fathom why my father-in-law had amassed such a fortune, but it seemed that after my mother-in-law's passing, he had turned to investments he had been studying, and they had proven lucrative. His savings had grown exponentially, fueled by his restrained spending habits. Yet even if he intended to renovate the house or purchase a car, the sum seemed excessive. Reluctantly, I returned the bank book, shaking my head. "I can't accept this much. Please keep it for yourself." He pushed the book back toward me, insisting, "I can't possibly use all of this. I'd rather return it to you and your family, who are willing to care for me." Once again faced with the returned bank book, I stood my ground. "I really can't accept such a large sum," I insisted firmly. After a brief pause, my father-in-law proposed, "How about $1 million?" Realizing the impasse, I managed to negotiate a compromise, settling on a reduced amount of $100,000. Though he seemed reluctant, he agreed, and for the time being, that seemed satisfactory. As we were in the midst of this exchange, Isabella suddenly appeared, catching us off guard. Quickly, I stashed the bank book back in its place. Seeing my hurried actions, Isabella's brow furrowed in concern. "What's going on?" she inquired, her voice tinged with worry. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful she hadn't overheard our previous conversation. Isabella had come to deliver some clothes for our father. After a brief exchange, we left the hospital room together. However, on our way home, Isabella suggested stopping by a coffee shop for a discussion. Given her history of bringing up unpleasant topics, I braced myself for what was to come. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, unaware of the twist awaiting us. "I'll take care of Dad," Isabella declared out of the blue, stunning me. Her sudden proposition caught me off guard, especially since we were already knee-deep in preparations to accommodate my father-in-law, including ongoing renovations to our home. I couldn't fathom why she would make such a proposal at this stage. "So you won't need to visit the hospital anymore," she added. "Visiting isn't solely the responsibility of the caregiver. There's no rule dictating that only the caretaker should visit." Why would she say that? I pondered, feeling perplexed by Isabella's unexpected offer. Despite my reservations, I suggested we postpone discussing it further and made my exit from the cafe. Back at home, I shared the encounter with John, who mulled over it before a realization dawned on him. "She must have caught wind of the savings," he concluded. "It seems that's the case," he added. "Otherwise, she wouldn't have volunteered for the caretaking role, especially given her previous reluctance." I harbored a vague suspicion that Isabella had somehow discovered the extent of my father-in-law's savings and was angling to secure a share of it for herself. Perhaps she would concoct a reason to start dipping into the funds. "But what do we do about it?" I queried, feeling a sense of unease. "I've got an idea. Let's give her a chance," John suggested with a mischievous grin, hinting at a plan brewing in his mind. Uneasy about his scheme, I opted to stay silent and play along with Isabella's request for the time being. I assured my father-in-law that financial concerns were no longer an issue and that Isabella would be providing care. His response was vague, his expression neither confirming nor denying his comprehension. With that, the conversation concluded. Following his discharge from the hospital, my father-in-law returned to the family home in Nebraska, where Isabella resided. During a visit to the house, I couldn't discern any signs of renovation or adequate caregiving supplies. I questioned whether genuine caregiving could take place under such circumstances. However, it was Isabella's decision, and I felt it wasn't my place to intervene, so I remained silent. 2 months later, I received a frantic call from Isabella. "Mary, I can't do this anymore. Please come over right now," she pleaded urgently. Concerned, I wasted no time and rushed to the house in Nebraska. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by a disarrayed house and a foul odor lingering in the air. Puzzled by the scene before me, Isabella emerged, looking more worn out than ever. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements were unsteady. "Are you all right?" I asked, rushing to her side, alarmed by her condition. Isabella grasped my hand tightly and muttered, "Get rid of that." Confused at first, I managed to calm her down and coax an explanation out of her. It appeared that she had underestimated the demands of caregiving. From assisting with mobility and meals to managing incontinence, including dealing with diapers, the responsibilities had overwhelmed her. She felt incapable of managing anything, not even attending to her own needs. I reassured her that I couldn't make any immediate decisions but promised to reach out as soon as possible. With a heavy heart, I carried this burden home with me. "It's been 2 months already." "Impressive," John remarked, glancing at the calendar. It seemed he had anticipated this turn of events. He suggested we pick up my father-in-law on his next day off, and I readily agreed. A few days later, as we arrived at the family home in Nebraska, my father-in-law was already packed and prepared to depart. Relief washed over me knowing we could finally bring him home. Just because I endured for 2 months and used to live here doesn't mean I don't deserve compensation. I think $5 million sounds fair, Isabella declared suddenly as we were assisting my father-in-law into the car. I froze in disbelief. John, too, was taken aback, turning to face Isabella with a mixture of surprise and dismay. But she remained unfazed, sporting a smug expression. Isabella, what on earth are you talking about? This isn't the time or place to discuss money, especially not in front of Dad. Remember, he raised us, John reasoned, attempting to appeal to her sense of decency, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. I'm his daughter. It's only fair that I get compensated, Isabella retorted defiantly, her audacity catching me off guard. How could she be so brazen? Appalled by Isabella's attitude, I couldn't hold back. Isabella, discussing money in this manner is completely inappropriate. Besides, you've already received funds, I interjected, my father-in-law echoing my sentiment with a disbelieving expression. That's all gone now. Just $5 million. What's the harm in that? If you're just going to squander it away, you might as well put it to good use, sis. Isabella's callous words towards her own father left me speechless. Even my typically composed husband John was visibly enraged, his face flushing red with anger as he glared at his sister. John, it's all right, she's stating the truth. Bob, my father-in-law, attempted to calm his incensed son. Then, turning to Isabella with a stern demeanor, he delivered his verdict. Isabella, you are no longer welcome in this house. Leave immediately. His tone was cold and final. Stunned by his words, Isabella stood frozen in shock. What? What are you saying? I'm your daughter, Dad, Isabella exclaimed in disbelief. I have only one child, my son, and this woman beside me, Mary, is my daughter-in-law. I no longer recognize you. Leave with your foolish husband. Bob, my father-in-law, responded with a sternness that startled me. I had only known him to be gentle and soft-spoken, but now his eyes were steely, commanding no opposition. Even Isabella seemed subdued by his authority. Shall we depart then? We're relying on you moving forward, Bob continued, his demeanor shifting back to its usual warmth as he addressed me. With no other recourse, John and I complied with his directive. As we drove away, leaving Isabella behind in stunned silence, it felt surreal. Later, we learned that Bob had arranged with his lawyer to draft a last will and testament, ensuring that the inheritance would solely benefit John and guaranteeing that Isabella would not receive any portion of it. With Isabella gone, the house stood vacant and John and I expressed our desire to reside there. Bob gladly agreed. Isabella and her husband relocated to an apartment, but it became evident they had been tapping into Bob's finances even when he was in good health. Their extravagant spending habits landed them in debt, and now they struggle to settle it. Each day, I can't shake the feeling that this downfall was bound to happen for someone like Isabella, who lacks respect and gratitude towards her parent, regardless of biological ties. While tending to Bob's needs presents its challenges, my background in caregiving allows me to handle it without feeling burdened, and our relationship remains strong. When I first met my son's fiancée, she wasted no time in delivering her cutting remarks. Your father only finished middle school. Can you even find a job with such minimal qualifications? She jeered, her laughter echoing through the room. Her father joined in, adding insult to injury with his own jibes. As if that wasn't enough, they made it clear I was not included in their meal plans, serving food only for themselves. The fiancée's mother, with a smirk plastered on her face, remarked, I only cook for my family. I've never encountered such a ridiculous parent during a family introduction. I decided I wouldn't tolerate their disrespect any longer. Feel free to say what you like, I retorted before swiftly exiting the restaurant. My name is Stephen Walker, 60 years old and father to Michael, a 25-year-old whose relationship with me is strained, to say the least. He hasn't set foot in my house in ages. I've often found myself grappling with regret over the way I raised him, especially considering it's what ultimately led to losing my beloved wife when Michael was still in elementary school. My wife had been fragile since childhood, and her passing at the tender age of 45 left a profound void in our lives. At her funeral, I paid no mind to the judgmental gazes of relatives. Grief enveloped me like a child in a daze. Michael, composed beyond his years, gently urged me, "Dad, it's heartbreaking, but we need to bid Mom farewell." Yet my sorrow seemed fleeting, confined to those somber moments. At that time, I was overseeing a real estate business inherited from my father. The day following my wife's funeral, I awoke to a flurry of client calls. Duty beckoned, loyal clients awaited, and Michael needed my sole care. Those calls jolted me back to reality, propelling me to my office. Simultaneously, I found myself immersed in school functions and PTA gatherings, shouldering the responsibilities once shared with my wife. It was an unsteady juggle. I alone struggled to balance work and school commitments. I made a swift decision to temporarily shutter my business, passing my clientele to another real estate agency to devote time to Michael. Yet, upon arriving at his school, I was met with a cold reception. Michael's glare pierced through me as he uttered, "Dad, I told you not to come." His words stung deeper when he pleaded, "Don't let anyone know you're my dad," leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own son's life. Even now, as I sport a walker name tag during PTA activities, the reason behind Michael's sudden aloofness remains a puzzle. During one such event, my mother's innocent inquiry unraveled the truth. "Isn't that your father?" she questioned, oblivious to the tension. "What's he doing here on a weekday? Has he nothing else to occupy his time since your mother passed?" Michael, silent and crestfallen, bore the brunt of his classmates' ridicule. Desperate to shield him from further humiliation, I intervened, offering a feeble excuse about taking a break from work akin to their summer or winter recess. Yet Michael's vulnerability only served as fodder for his peers' mockery, leaving me grappling with a sense of helplessness. "Your dad's only job was pretending to take a break. Your family's poor. I'll share my lunch bread with you." Michael's classmates' taunts only fueled his growing resentment. "Damn you, Dad, your words just made me look even worse," he seethed. Helpless against the onslaught of mockery, I could only avert my gaze, my heart heavy with the weight of his pain. Countless tears were shed in solitude as I grappled with my own sense of inadequacy. As Michael entered middle school, he began drifting towards troubled company. Nights were spent at friends' homes or lingering in gas station parking lots until the early hours. In an era where cell phones were a luxury, his absence became increasingly alarming. With each passing day, he returned home less frequently, leaving me in the dark about his whereabouts and activities. All I could do was offer apologies when the school's calls came, reporting complaints from nearby gas stations. Whenever I visited Michael's school, I endured a barrage of insults from him and his unruly peers, who hurled derogatory names and empty cans my way. Michael's demeanor had turned increasingly volatile since entering middle school, leaving me terrified to even approach him, unsure of how he might react. Reflecting on my parenting during his elementary years, I wished I had handled things differently. Yet I was at a loss. What was the appropriate approach to address a child's unruly behavior? Communication with a teenager seemed like an insurmountable challenge, leaving me utterly bewildered. Michael's truancy and classroom disruptions escalated, with his academic performance plummeting to new lows. During the parent-teacher conference, the prospect of a private high school emerged as a beacon of hope. Relief washed over me knowing there was an alternative where Michael could thrive. Perhaps, I reasoned, a change in environment and peer group would temper his behavior. True to my hopes, Michael's transition to high school marked a turning point. He applied himself diligently, achieving modestly above-average grades and even securing admission to college. Yet despite his academic strides, his animosity towards me remained steadfast. Even as he progressed through high school and into college, Michael remained elusive, preferring the company of friends to returning home. Upon entering college, he embraced independent living in a dorm, financing his education through part-time work. His self-sufficiency was admirable, yet his demeanor towards me remained frosty. Even as he ventured into the workforce, the threshold of our home remained untouched by his presence. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, after years of silence, Michael reached out. "I found someone I want to marry," he declared abruptly over the phone, followed by the directive, "We're meeting at a fancy restaurant next Sunday at 2 p.m. Be there." His plans were laid out without the courtesy of inquiring about my availability. Caught off guard, I protested, "This is all too sudden," only to be met with indifference. "If you can't make it, don't bother," he retorted before abruptly ending the call, leaving me bewildered by his callous demeanor. Despite my conflicting emotions, I couldn't deny the bond I shared with my precious son. So for his sake, I complied with his summons and arrived promptly at the upscale restaurant as instructed. Upon my arrival, her parents greeted me with an air of hostility, demanding, "Who are you?" In a manner that caught me off guard. Irritated by their rudeness, I retorted, "You call me out of the blue and then ask who? Give me a break." Yet my frustration fell on deaf ears as they denied any involvement in summoning me, mirroring my son's cold demeanor. Meanwhile, Michael stood nearby, sporting a smug grin that set off warning bells in my mind. Though uncertain of his intentions, I cautiously proceeded into the restaurant, the air thick with unspoken tension. As I stood there, feeling like an unwelcome intruder, Michael redirected the conversation towards me, painting a less than flattering picture of my life. "This guy," he began, gesturing towards me, "dropped out of high school and has been idle since mom passed away." I attempted to interject, urging him to reconsider the appropriateness of the discussion, but he remained steadfast in his narrative. To my dismay, Sarah joined in with mocking laughter, questioning the employability of someone with only a middle school education. Adding insult to injury, Sarah's father chimed in, applauding Michael's achievements in contrast to my perceived shortcomings. It was a humiliating moment, with Michael basking in the praise while I stood there, painfully aware of the disparagement directed towards me. Exhausted and disheartened, I was on the verge of walking out, ready to utter the words, "Say what you want, I'm out of here." But before I could speak, a waiter approached from behind me with the food, apologizing for the delay. It was a stark reminder that the meal had yet to arrive, a fact that had slipped my mind in the heat of the moment. Attempting to regain my composure, I resigned myself to eating what was in front of me and departing. However, my efforts were thwarted when the waiter brought out dishes only for Michael, Sarah, and her parents, apologizing for a reservation oversight. Sarah's mother, with a saccharine smile, dismissed my presence, declaring, "He's not part of our family, so please disregard him." The waiter, visibly uncomfortable, retreated just as my frustration reached its peak. Before I could react, Sarah's father intervened, his tone laced with disdain. "We have no interest in associating with a deadbeat high school dropout," he asserted, casting me out with a sharp dismissal. It was a bitter blow, hearing such words of rejection from those gathered around the table. That was the last straw. "Is education and job history all that matter to you?" I exclaimed, rising from my seat. "Seems like you folks are a bit out of touch with reality." With those words, I made my intent to leave abundantly clear. In response, Sarah's father delivered a cutting retort, emphasizing the importance of education and job history, particularly in his line of work at Bank of America. His condescending remarks stung, but I managed a parting comment as I exited the scene. "Impressive working at Bank of America," I murmured under my breath, though what I heard amidst the tension in the air. The following day, I made my way to Bank of America, where Sarah's father held his position. Despite being labeled a deadbeat by my son, his peers, and even my son's prospective in-laws, I must clarify that the title doesn't quite fit. Following my wife's passing, I opted for a temporary closure of the real estate business I managed. However, it's essential to note that this closure was not permanent. In the wake of my wife's demise, I pivoted my business towards online management, prioritizing my son's school commitments and PTA engagements. While operating a physical storefront, my clientele primarily consisted of local residents. However, transitioning to online management opened doors to a broader spectrum of clients, including those residing in rural areas, miles away from the nearest train station, and even American expatriates. The internet served as a gateway to a wider market, allowing me to expand my property portfolio and cater to an extensive clientele. Running a real estate business online not only made my operations more efficient, but also transformed distant aspirations into tangible realities. In addition to my real estate ventures, I also dabbled in stocks and investments as a personal hobby. Currently, I have $50 million deposited in Bank of America, where Sarah's father holds his position. Upon my arrival at the bank, I wasted no time in requesting a meeting with the branch manager to address the events of the previous day. I was informed by one of your employees that this bank operates on trust founded upon educational background and work history. I explained, my disappointment evident. As a result of that statement, I've lost all faith in this institution. Could you please assist me with closing my account? The branch manager, visibly distraught, offered profuse apologies and guided me through the account closure process. On a separate note, there's an issue I nearly overlooked. An individual who has neglected to pay rent for the apartment I own for the past 2 years. I have been turning a blind eye to the issue, assuming leniency because he's my son, but enough was enough. I mailed him a notice demanding 2 years' worth of rent. 3 days later, I found myself face to face with Sarah's father and my son, both furious. "Why did you go behind my back and report me to the branch manager, Dad?" Michael accused, his tone seething with betrayal. Sarah's father chimed in, equally incensed, "And what's with that notice? If you're the manager, you should be covering for me." Exasperated, I replied, "I lost trust in the bank after discovering their practice of judging clients based on education and work history. Are you both panicking because of one person's comment? Do you have something to hide?" I turned to Michael, adding sternly, "Just because we're family doesn't mean you can shirk your responsibilities. Pay your own rent." Sarah's father interjected, "Your actions have caused a stir. I've received numerous complaints from other clients, and my boss reprimanded me because of your antics. It's outrageous." I haven't caused any trouble. I simply shared the situation in passing with my relatives and clients, I clarified with a gentle smile. My son retorted sharply, "Clients? What clients, Dad? You're just a deadbeat, aren't you?" I met his accusation with a calm rebuttal. "Do you think a deadbeat could afford to construct a substantial house in such a prime location and maintain this lifestyle? I've even undertaken recent renovations." My son's expression shifted to one of confusion as he exclaimed, "Ha? What do you mean? Did you go into debt or something? I'm really fed up with you." I took a hiatus from my real estate job for a period and transitioned to managing an online business, which I'm still involved in. How many times do I need to reiterate? I'm not a slacker, I stated firmly, watching as my son's complexion drained of color. "What? I had no idea. I thought you were only working part-time," he stammered in disbelief. Sarah's father erupted in anger. "You're quite the piece of work, hiding your occupation even from your own son." Annoyed by the accusation, I retorted, "Say whatever you want," as I shut the front door behind me, cutting off further discussion. Outside, their voices echoed in heated accusations, punctuated by threats of legal action and bitter resentment. "You've tarnished my reputation. I'll take you to court. I can't believe I've been deceived by my own father all this time. I won't stand for it." Their argument escalated into a cacophony of shouts, but after about 10 minutes of fervent protest, their voices gradually dwindled into silence. It seemed they had exhausted their anger, realizing the futility of their outbursts. I breathed a sigh of relief, assuming they would refrain from returning. However, just as the tranquility settled in, my son's enraged voice shattered the calm. "You deceitful liar. What are you still doing here?" I peered out the window to witness Sarah's father and my son defacing my front door with spray paint. "This can't be happening. What are they plotting?" Just as I prepared to confront them, the wail of police sirens pierced the air, drawing closer by the second. Could it be that a concerned neighbor had alerted the authorities? My suspicions were confirmed when I stepped outside to find them both being apprehended by the police, responding to a complaint from the neighborhood. "There he is, that deceitful liar. I've lost all credibility at work because of him." Their accusations reverberated through the air as the police calmly escorted them into the patrol car, reassuringly stating, all right, we'll handle it from here." Suddenly noticing my presence, one of the officers approached me with an oddly cheerful demeanor. "Sir, would you mind accompanying us to provide your statement?" "Why me? But I suppose I'm the one wronged here. I'll spill the beans on all their deceitful antics," I replied, agreeing to go with them. Upon arrival at the police station, I presented the officers with footage from a security camera installed at my front door, capturing the entire commotion. "This is excellent evidence," exclaimed one of the officers, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. With the video in hand, my interrogation was swiftly concluded. Consequently, my son and Sarah's father received a stern warning from the police and were required to sign a restraining order, mandating that they maintain their distance from me. As it turned out, the entire neighborhood bore witness to their outrageous behavior. Word spread like wildfire, reaching even my son's workplace. A coworker who resided nearby couldn't contain the gossip, regaling the office with tales of Michael's arrest for vandalizing his own father's property. I was so taken aback that I captured the entire ordeal on video. The news of Michael's antics quickly spread throughout his workplace and among clients, resulting in his demotion by his employer. Determined to address the matter, I returned to Bank of America, where Sarah's father was employed. Upon presenting the manager with the security camera footage from my phone, his complexion drained of color. Subsequently, I learned that Sarah's father had been terminated from his position, and naturally, Sarah called off her engagement with Michael. Both Michael and Sarah's family relocated to a rural area, seeking refuge from the fallout of their actions. Rumor had it that Sarah's parents even took up part-time employment at a remote gas station operated by my brother. They were no good at it, couldn't grasp the basics of stocking shelves no matter how many times I showed them. Had to give them the boot right away. And word has it, nearby gas stations and farms did the same. According to my brother, it seems Sarah's parents can't hold down a steady job. They're bouncing around from one gig to another at gas stations and farms as a duo. Additionally, Sarah was known for showering her boyfriends, including my son, with lavish gifts like watches, and she ended up in debt because of it. The meager earnings her parents make from their part-time gigs reportedly go straight into clearing their daughter's debts, leaving it a mystery how they managed to make ends meet. It's been 5 years since then, and my son is now 30. It seems that he's made positive changes after experiencing kindness from the people in the small town he moved to. He approached me on a couple of occasions, offering sincere apologies. I realized I had been naive and immature, hastily labeling him as good for nothing without making an effort to understand his job. The weight of regret for my actions is something I can't apologize enough for. Observing the shift in my son's demeanor, I made the decision to allow him to move in with me. Now, he's employed at a company near my residence, and gradually, he's begun assisting me with my work as well. However, it's important to note that he's still inexperienced and I'm cautious about placing complete trust in him. While I remain hesitant to delegate all my tasks to him, I intend to closely monitor his behavior and attitude towards work before making any further decisions. If he demonstrates a genuine transformation in his life, I might entertain the idea of entrusting him with my business. However, expressing this possibility directly to him could lead to impulsivity. He might eagerly respond with, "Seriously, I'll resign tomorrow," and act without careful consideration. For now, I'm living with my son, holding on to the hope that someday I'll feel secure enough to place my complete trust in him.